"Put it down." Vivienne Laurent's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. She held up the small, brown-wrapped package between two fingers, the way someone holds a piece of trash, and laughed loud enough for the entire room to hear. Did the maid actually bring a gift? The laughter spread. Champagne glasses clinked. Nobody looked at Elena. Nobody noticed her hands trembling at her sides. And nobody, not one person in that glittering room, noticed the way Adrian Moretti had gone completely dangerously still. If you've ever been dismissed like you were invisible, stay with this story. Subscribe to our channel, follow along until the very end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The engagement party for Adrian Moretti and Vivienne Laurent was the kind of event that people talked about for years afterward. Not because it was beautiful, though it was. Not because the guest list read like a directory of Chicago's most powerful families, though it did. People talked about it for years because of what happened in the first hour. Because of a small brown package. Because of a maid who had never asked for anything in her life. And because of the moment the most dangerous man in Chicago realized he had been looking at the wrong people for a very long time. The Moretti mansion on the north side of Chicago had been built to impress. 4 stories of stone and glass sprawling gardens, a ballroom that had hosted senators, foreign dignitaries, and men whose names appeared in no public records. The chandeliers alone were worth more than most people's homes. The floral arrangements for the engagement party, white roses and deep burgundy peonies, had been flown in from a greenhouse in the Netherlands. Every detail had been planned by Vivienne herself. She had walked through the mansion 3 times in the week, leading up to the event, pointing at things that needed to be adjusted, moved, replaced. She had spoken to the catering director twice, and the head of household staff once briefly, with the kind of clipped efficiency that made clear she was not interested in their opinions. She was going to be Mrs. Moretti. She was already acting like it. The guests arrived in waves beginning at 7 in the evening. Black cars pulled up to the circular driveway. Men in tailored suits stepped out alongside women in dresses that cost more than most cars. The gifts they brought were placed on a long table near the main entrance boxes from jewelers' bags, from designer houses. Flat envelopes that clearly held bank drafts or investment account transfers. Marco De Luca brought a vintage watch from a Swiss house that no longer accepted new clients. Sofia Benedetti brought a diamond pendant that had belonged to a European countess. The Ferretti brothers brought a matching set of cufflinks and a bracelet engraved, because everything the Ferretti brothers gave was engraved. Gift after gift arrived, each one more expensive than the last. Each one placed carefully on the table by staff who were trained to handle valuable items without expression. Elena Rossi placed her gift on the table herself. Nobody offered to take it from her. She was 29 years old and had worked inside the Moretti household for 22 months. She was not the kind of person who stood out in a room. She was quiet in the way that people who carry heavy things quietly tend to be. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she had learned over a long time that saying it didn't always help. Her gift was wrapped in brown paper from the kitchen supply closet. She had asked Mrs. Caruso, the head housekeeper, whether it was acceptable for staff to bring gifts to the engagement party, and Mrs. Caruso had told her she could bring something if she wanted to, but that she should keep it small. Staff were expected to attend the early portion of the event to help with crowd flow and manage the gift table, not to participate as guests. Elena understood that. She had not come to participate. She had come because she wanted to give something. She set the box on the far corner of the gift table near the edge, where it wouldn't be in the way. Then she stepped back and returned to her work. Adrian Moretti arrived in the ballroom at 7:30. He was not a man who made entrances. He didn't need to. When Adrian walked into a room, people noticed not because he announced himself, but because the air in the room changed the way it changes right before a weather system moves, in that quiet shift in pressure that your body feels before your mind registers it. He was 38 years old, built lean and controlled, with dark eyes that missed very little, and a face that gave even less away. He had inherited the Moretti name at 24 when his father was killed in what was publicly called a car accident, and privately understood to be something else entirely. He had taken a collection of failing businesses and broken alliances and had rebuilt them into something that no one challenged anymore. He shook hands. He smiled at the right moments. He said the appropriate things to the appropriate people. And underneath all of it, he was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. He had agreed to this engagement because it made sense. The Laurent family held connections he needed. Vivienne was intelligent, presentable, and had grown up inside the kind of world where what she knew could only be learned by being born into it. She understood the rules. She knew how to be seen. He had told himself those things were enough. He was still telling himself that when he crossed the ballroom and found her near the gift table, holding something small between two fingers, with an expression on her face he had never seen directed at anything before. Contempt. Pure, unconcealed contempt. "Adrien," she said, not turning to look at him, still studying the small brown package like it was an insult that had arrived in the mail. "Did you know one of the maids brought a gift?" He looked at the package. "She works here," he said. "I'm aware of what she does." "Then what's the question?" Vivienne finally turned to look at him. She had a particular smile she used when she believed she was the cleverest person in a conversation, a slight tightening at the corners of her mouth, a look that lived in her eyes before it reached anywhere else. "There's no question," she said. "It's just funny." She didn't wait for his response. She carried the package toward the center of the room. Yep, Tug. Elena was refilling water glasses near the kitchen entrance when she heard it. Vivienne's voice carrying across the ballroom with the confident projection of someone who has always believed rooms belong to them. "Everyone look what someone brought." Elena turned and felt the floor shift under her. Vivienne was holding up the brown package. She had not opened it yet. She didn't need to. The wrapping alone was the joke. In a room full of velvet boxes and silk ribbons and white tissue paper folded with professional precision, the kitchen string and brown paper looked like something that had come in through the wrong door. People were looking. Some of them were already smiling. Elena didn't move. She stood with the water pitcher in her hands and watched. "Is this a gift for the future husband of the Moretti family?" Vivienne laughed a bright social laugh, the kind designed to invite other people's laughter in. "Someone is very creative." The word dropped into the room with a meaning that had nothing to do with creativity. A few guests laughed. A few more smiled politely. A few looked at their glasses. Elena set the water pitcher down on the nearest surface because her hands had started shaking and she did not want anyone to see that. "It's homemade," someone near Vivienne said, peering at the box. "What is it?" Vivienne untied the kitchen string with 2 fingers carefully, as though even touching it required maintenance. She lifted the lid. She looked inside. For a single moment, one breath, barely a second, something crossed her face that was not laughter. Fear. Not the sharp kind. The old kind. The kind that lives underneath everything else that a person has learned to cover so well that it only surfaces when they are caught off guard. Then it was gone. She recovered the way beautiful, powerful people always recover, instantly, completely, as though the moment never happened. She let the lid drop back. She looked up at the room, and she laughed. "Cute," she said. "But people like us don't celebrate memories." She picked up her champagne glass. "We celebrate value." The room laughed with her. She set the box back on the edge of the table and moved away, already talking to someone else, already forgetting about it. Elena picked up the water pitcher. She walked back toward the kitchen. She did not cry. She had learned a long time ago how to hold the things that hurt in a place where no one could see them. What she did not know, what nobody in that room knew, was that Adrien Moretti had watched the entire thing. He had seen Vivienne carry the package to the center of the room. He had heard the laughter. He had watched the moment Vivienne opened the box and felt something she immediately covered over. And he had noticed the maid with the water pitcher. He had noticed the way she set it down. He had noticed the moment her hands were shaking. He had noticed because Adrien Moretti noticed things that other people did not notice. It was not sentimentality. It was how he had survived. The details that other people dismissed were the details that mattered most. He did not say anything, not then. He crossed the room, he rejoined the conversation he had left, and he let the party continue. But he picked up the brown package on his way past the gift table, and he carried it with him. On. The party ran until midnight. It was exactly the kind of evening it was supposed to be. Vivian moved through the room like she was already the mistress of it, which she was not wrong to feel. The Moretti mansion would become her home. The Moretti name would become hers. The power that came attached to both would belong to her in ways that were not public, but were understood. She was poised. She was gracious. She thanked the right people and remembered the right details about the right lives. She was by every visible measure exactly what the evening required. Adrian watched her from across the room and thought about a conversation he'd had years ago with his consigliere, a 70-year-old man named Felix, who had survived 4 decades in this world by paying attention to things that other people considered irrelevant. The problem with powerful people, Felix had told him once, is that they confuse what they have with who they are. The moment someone forgets the difference, they become dangerous. Not to enemies, to themselves. Adrian had filed that observation away. He was filing things now. After the guests left and the staff had begun the quiet work of clearing the ballroom, Adrian sat alone in his study. He set the brown package on the desk in front of him. He looked at it for a long time. Then he untied the kitchen string. Carefully. Not the way Vivian had 2 fingers performance, but with actual care, the way you treat something that someone put time into. He lifted the lid. Inside was a small dessert, wrapped in wax paper. It was nothing that would have turned heads in a restaurant. It was nothing that any of the caterers tonight would have put on their menus. It was simple and plain and completely ordinary looking. He took a small piece. He ate it. And then the world he had built around himself very quietly came apart. Not violently, not dramatically. It fell apart the way the last wall of a house falls apart, when everything else has already been removed slowly, with a sound that is more like settling than breaking. Because the taste was something he recognized. Not from last year, not from last month. From 30 years ago. From a kitchen that no longer existed in a neighborhood that had changed beyond recognition, in a life that bore no resemblance to the one he currently occupied. His mother's kitchen, the smell of it, the sound of it. The way the window above the sink let in a particular angle of winter light on Sunday mornings. Lucia Moretti had not been a wealthy woman when Adrian was a child. She had been a woman who cooked for neighbors who couldn't afford to eat well, who sent food to families on the block without being asked, who believed and said this so often that Adrian had eventually stopped hearing it the way he should have, that feeding someone was the same as telling them they mattered. She had made this dessert, this exact dessert, on Sunday mornings, on birthdays, on the days when things were difficult, and she wanted to remind her son that the world still contained sweetness. Adrian sat with the small piece of dessert in his hand, and he did not move for a very long time. He had not thought about his mother's kitchen in years. Not because he had forgotten her, he had not, but because he had built so much distance between himself and the person he used to be, that the memories lived behind a wall he rarely approached. He approached it now. He had no choice. Because whoever had made this dessert had used the exact same ingredients, the exact same proportions, the exact same quiet patience that could not be faked or approximated. Someone knew. Someone had known this recipe the way you only know something that was passed directly from one pair of hands to another. He set the box down. He pressed both hands flat on the desk. He stared at the wall of his study, the tasteful art, the rows of books that decorated more than they were read, the photographs of powerful men shaking hands, and he felt for the first time in longer than he could pinpoint completely lost. Not in danger, not in crisis, just lost in the way a person is lost when they realize they have been living so far from the center of themselves that they can no longer clearly remember where that center is. He called for his assistant at 12:30 in the morning. Daniel Reyes had worked for Adrian for 9 years. He was 32 years old, had a master's degree. He never mentioned, and had survived working for Adrian Moretti by developing a finely tuned ability to read the difference between what Adrian asked for and what Adrian actually needed. Right now, Daniel could see that his employer was not angry. He was something Daniel had not seen before in 9 years. He was shaken. "The gift on the desk," Adrian said. "Brown paper. Who brought it?" Daniel already knew the answer. He had reviewed the guest arrival records as he always did, cataloging who had come with what. "Elena Rossi," he said. "She's on the household staff. She's been here 22 months, Adrian said. "I know how long she's been here." He paused. "Tell me something I don't already know." Daniel hesitated. "She works nights sometimes," he said. "Shifts at another job. Her file has a secondary address listed. It's a medical residence care facility on the west side. She's staying there. Her brother is. He's been there for about a year." Daniel paused. "She's listed as his primary financial support." Adrian looked at the box on the desk. "Does she work nights often?" "She's taken on extra shifts here about 6 times in the past 4 months, covered for other staff when they were sick." Daniel checked his notes, though he didn't need to. He already knew what they said. "She's never asked for the extra pay to be noted in her file. She just does it." "Why would she not want it noted?" "I don't know," Daniel said carefully. "But she hasn't." Adrian nodded slowly. "The recipe this came from," he said. "I need to understand where she got it." Daniel waited. "My mother used to make this," Adrian said. The room was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me to speak to her?" Daniel asked. "No." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "I'll speak to her myself." Daniel nodded and turned toward the door. "Daniel." He turned back. "Tonight," Adrian said. "When Vivian did what she did. With the gift." "Yes," Daniel said. "How many people saw it?" "The whole room," Daniel said. "Or most of it." Adrian looked at the wall again. "All right," he said. That was all. But Daniel Reyes had worked for this man for 9 years, and he knew what "all right" meant when it was said in that particular tone. It meant nothing is all right. It meant something is about to change. He let himself out of the study quietly and went to prepare for a very different tomorrow. Elena was still awake at 1 in the morning. She was sitting on the edge of her bed in the small room allocated to live-in household staff, 4th floor east wing, a clean and adequate room that she had never tried to make feel like more than it was. She had a book open in her lap, though she had not read a word in 40 minutes. She was thinking about her grandmother. Nonna Rossi had died 4 years ago at 81 years old in a hospital room with 2 family members present and a view of a parking structure through the window. She had not died wealthy or recognized or particularly comfortable. She had died the way she had lived quietly, without fuss, having given most of what she had to other people. She had given Elena a recipe, not just the ingredients, not just the steps. She had taught Elena to make it slowly over 3 Sunday afternoons, explaining as they went. She told Elena about the woman she had once worked for, a kind woman, a generous woman, a woman named Lucia, who had shared her own recipe with Nonna Rossi the same way, hand to hand, Sunday to Sunday. "Food is memory," Nonna had told her. "You can't buy the right memory, you can only pass it on." Elena had made the dessert as her gift for the engagement party because she had wanted to give something real in a room that would be full of things that were expensive but not real. She had saved money for the specific ingredients over 2 months. She had made it in the kitchen during her early morning shift before the catering company arrived, using a corner of the counter where no one would disturb it. She had not expected it to land well. She had not expected it to matter. She had not expected Vivienne Laurent to carry it to the center of the room and make it the evening's entertainment. Elena closed her book. She told herself it was fine. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself these things with the quiet, practiced efficiency of someone who has told themselves difficult things for a very long time. And then she heard a knock at her door. She opened it. Daniel Reyes was standing in the hallway with an expression she could not immediately read. "Mr. Moretti would like to speak with you," he said. "Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock in the main office." Elena looked at him. "Is this about tonight?" she asked. "I believe so," Daniel said. She nodded. "All right," she said. She closed the door. She sat back down on the edge of her bed. She picked up her book again, but she still did not read. She was thinking about her grandmother. She was thinking about Sunday afternoons in a small kitchen that smelled like butter and vanilla, and something that could only be described as safe. She was thinking about the look on Vivienne Laurent's face when she opened the box. That 1 second. That flicker of something underneath all the laughter. Elena had seen it. She was the only person in the room who had recognized it, because she had seen that expression on her own face once. The expression of someone who has just encountered something that they thought was gone forever. And she had understood in that one unguarded second that whatever Vivienne was performing tonight, the confidence, the cruelty, the beautiful certainty of someone who has never been made to feel small, all of it was a performance. And underneath it was a woman who was afraid of exactly what Elena carried without knowing it. The evidence that something could matter, that something simple could mean more than something expensive, that the world they had both built around themselves, the one with rules and ranks and categories for what had value, could be undone by a box wrapped in brown paper and kitchen string. Elena set her book down on the nightstand. She turned off the light. She lay in the dark and thought about her brother Marco sleeping now in the care facility across the city, in a bed that her extra shifts were helping to pay for, in a program that the doctors had said might actually be working. She thought about what she would say to Adrian Moretti in the morning. She had no idea what he wanted. But she had nothing to hide. She had given the gift she had given. She had meant every part of it. Whatever came next, she could stand behind that. She closed her eyes. Outside the window, Chicago was doing what Chicago always did. In October, wind off the lake city, sounds the low hum of a place that never fully slept. Elena listened to it, and slept. Adrian did not sleep. He sat in his study until 3 in the morning. At some point, he poured a drink and didn't touch it. He thought about his mother. He thought about the last time he had sat in a kitchen and felt genuinely quietly safe. He had been 11 years old. There had been a Sunday morning in winter, and his mother had made this dessert, and she had told him something that he had heard, but not understood, until sometime much later in a different version of his life. She had told him, "Adrian, the most dangerous thing in the world is not an enemy who wants to destroy you. It's a life so full of the wrong things that there is no room left for what matters." He had been 11. He had nodded and eaten the rest of his dessert and thought about something else entirely. He was 38 now, and the room around him was very full of the wrong things. He looked at the brown paper package on his desk. He looked at the kitchen string loose now curled beside the box. He thought about a woman he had never spoken to directly in 22 months. A woman who worked extra shifts, who helped people who couldn't repay her, who had saved money for 2 months to make a gift that would be laughed at, and had come anyway, had brought it anyway, had stood in that room with a water pitcher in her trembling hands, and had not left, and had not cried, and had not said a word in her own defense, because she had given something true, and true things do not require defending. They only require recognition. Adrian finally touched the glass of whiskey he had poured. He didn't drink from it. He just held it and looked out the window of his study at the city he controlled, and felt for the first time in a long time the specific loneliness of a man who has everything he wanted and very little of what he needs. His mother had tried to tell him. He had been too busy building toward the wrong destination to hear her. He was listening now. The question was what he was going to do about it. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Elena Rossi knocked on the door of Adrian Moretti's private office. She had been awake since 5:30. Not because she was nervous, though she was, but because she had a shift that started at 6, and she did not intend to let the conversation she was about to have interfere with work that still needed to be done. She had finished restocking the East Wing linen closets, helped the kitchen staff with the breakfast setup, and changed out of her work apron before walking down the corridor toward the main office. She knocked. She waited. "Come in," Adrian said. She opened the door. He was seated behind a large desk, and the first thing Elena noticed was that he looked like a man who had not slept. Not disheveled Adrian Moretti was never disheveled, but there was something in the set of his jaw and the particular stillness of his face that told her the night had been long. The second thing she noticed was the brown package on the desk in front of him. Open, the lid beside it, the kitchen string loose, the wax paper folded back. She had not expected that. She stopped just inside the door. "Close it behind you," he said. She did. "Sit down." She sat in the chair across from his desk. A good chair, the kind that cost more than a month of her wages, and she folded her hands in her lap and waited. Adrian looked at her for a moment without speaking. Not the way powerful men sometimes looked at people who worked for them, not assessing, not dismissive. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they are trying to understand. "You made this," he said. It wasn't a question, but she answered it. "Yes." "Where did you get the recipe?" Elena paused for only a half second. "From my grandmother." Adrian's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. "What was your grandmother's name?" "Nonna Rossi," she said. "Giulia Rossi. She passed 4 years ago." He was quiet for a moment. "Did she ever tell you where she learned to make this?" And here was the moment Elena had half expected and half feared, the moment where the answer would matter more than she had anticipated when she walked through the door. "She told me," Elena said carefully, "that she learned it from a woman she worked for when she was young, a kind woman. She said she kept the recipe because it was the only thing the woman ever asked her to take." "Asked her to take," Adrian repeated. "Nonna said the woman told her, 'If you take nothing else from this kitchen, take this, so it doesn't disappear.'" The silence in the room was the kind that has weight. Adrian reached out and touched the edge of the box. "The woman your grandmother worked for," he said. "Her name was Lucia." It was not a question this time either. Elena met his eyes. "Yes." Adrian pressed his fingertips flat against the desk. He looked at the box for a long moment, and when he looked back up at her, Elena saw something she had not expected to see on this man's face. Something raw. Something that lived underneath everything he had built, underneath the control and the reputation and the careful blankness he wore in every room he occupied. "My mother's name was Lucia," he said. Elena did not say anything, because she had known that. She had known it since the 3rd week she worked in this house, when she had seen a framed photograph in one of the hallways, a photograph of a woman with dark hair and a wide, unguarded smile, and had asked Mrs. Caruso who it was. Mrs. Caruso had told her. And Elena had gone home that night and opened her grandmother's notebook and looked at the name written in the corner of the page where the recipe lived in Nonna's looping handwriting. Lucia. Her recipe. "Don't let it end with me." She had not said anything to anyone. She had not known what to say or who to say it to. She had spent months wondering whether the connection was real or only something she had invented because she wanted it to be real. And then the engagement was announced and the party was planned, and Elena had made a decision that she could not fully explain, not even to herself, except that it felt like the right kind of honoring, the right kind of passing forward. "I knew," she said quietly. "I found out after I started working here. I recognized the connection." Adrian looked at her. "And you didn't tell me?" "I didn't know how," she said. "And I didn't know if it would matter to you." "Didn't know if it would matter," he repeated. "You are not—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "You are not a person who seems to want to be approached about certain things." The corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile exactly. Something adjacent to it. "No," he said. "I suppose I'm not." He looked at the box again. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said. what she was like. Elena looked at him for a moment. Then she told him. She told him about Nonna Rossi, who had come to Chicago from a small town in southern Italy at 19 years old with $40 and the address of a cousin who had moved there 6 months earlier, who had worked in 3 different houses as domestic staff over 40 years, who had outlived her husband and one of her children and had never in Elena's memory complained about a single thing. She told him about Sunday afternoons in a small kitchen in Bridgeport, learning to cook not from recipes, but from watching. About the way her grandmother's hands moved with a certainty that came from decades of practice, and the way she talked while she cooked, stories flowing alongside the work like they were part of the same thing. She told him about the notebook, a small one covered in brown cloth filled with recipes written in Italian and occasional English with notes in the margins, things like more butter than you think, and don't rush it, and this one is for when someone needs to remember they are loved. Adrian listened without interrupting. He listened the way people listen when they are not waiting for their turn to speak, but actually receiving what is being said. Elena noticed this because it was not common. In her experience, powerful people listened the way they did everything else efficiently, with clear purpose, extracting what they needed and setting aside what they didn't. Adrian Moretti sat across from her and listened like he was 22 months late to a conversation he needed to have. "The note in the margin," he said when she described it. What did it say? Elena remembered it exactly. She had read it enough times. It said, "This is for the boy. He'll need it someday when the world has gotten too loud." Adrian was still, the kind of still that is not relaxation. "She wrote that," he said. "My grandmother kept the note because she didn't know who the boy was," Elena said. "She just kept it because Lucia asked her to." Adrian stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there for a moment with his back to her, and Elena waited, and outside the window, Chicago was going about its morning, in the way that cities go about their mornings without any particular concern for the complicated things happening inside the buildings it surrounded. When he turned back, his face was controlled again, but his eyes weren't. "Why did you bring it to the party?" he asked. "You must have known how it would be received." Elena met his question directly. "I thought it might mean something to you, even knowing it might be laughed at." "Things that mean something get laughed at sometimes," she said. "That doesn't stop them from meaning something." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," he said. "You've never spoken to me before," she said, "so I'm not sure what you expected." That did get a response, a short, quiet exhale that might have been a laugh from someone less guarded. "No," he said. "I haven't." He sat back down. "Tell me," he said, "what do you know about your grandmother's time working for my mother?" And Elena told him everything she knew, which was both more and less than he was hoping for. She knew that Nonna Rossi had worked in the Moretti household for 3 years in the early days before Adrian was born and through the first year of his life. She knew that Lucia Moretti had been kind to her grandmother in specific, concrete ways, had paid her fairly, had remembered the names of her family members, had sent food home with her on Fridays without being asked. She knew that when Nonna Rossi had left the job to move to a different neighborhood with her husband, Lucia had packed her a box of things from the kitchen and told her to keep them. The recipe was in this box. "I think," Elena said carefully, "that my grandmother loved your mother. Not in a complicated way. Just she admired her. She used to talk about her sometimes when she was very old, the way old people talk about the people who were kind to them when being kind to them cost something." Adrian absorbed this. "My mother died," he said, "when I was 21. "I know," Elena said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." He paused. "I mean, thank you. I only meant—" He stopped. "I don't usually talk about her." "I know that too," Elena said. He looked at her with a slightly different expression. "How much do you know about this household?" "I work here," she said simply. "You learn things when you work somewhere, not by looking for them, just by being present." "And what have you learned?" she considered. "That this is a house full of expensive things and not very much warmth. That the people who come here are mostly afraid of you or want something from you. That you eat alone most nights because you prefer it. That you've had 3 different housekeepers quit in the past 2 years because they found the environment. She paused, choosing the word with care, cold. Adrian studied her. You're not afraid of me. I was when I first started, she said honestly. But I stopped being afraid of you about 8 months ago. Why 8 months ago? Because I saw you carry Mrs. Caruso's groceries up from the service entrance when her back was hurting, and you didn't tell anyone you'd done it, and you looked irritated the whole time you were doing it, like you were angry at yourself for having a decent impulse. She paused. People who are purely dangerous don't have impulses like that. The silence stretched. Adrian looked at her with the particular expression of a man who has just been seen clearly and is not entirely sure how to respond to it. Mrs. Caruso told you, he said. Mrs. Caruso tells me everything, Elena said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I need to know something, and I need you to answer me without thinking about consequences. Elena nodded. Did you bring that gift because you wanted something from me? She didn't hesitate. No. Then why? She thought about how to explain it: the months of uncertainty, the long quiet of carrying a connection that didn't belong only to her, the feeling of holding something precious that had been placed in her care without her choosing it. Because your mother wanted the recipe to survive, she said. And it has survived. And she wrote a note that said it was for her boy. She looked at him steadily. You're her boy. It seemed like you should have it. Adrian Moretti, who had not cried in front of anyone in 17 years, looked away from her. He looked at the wall. He breathed slowly in the controlled, deliberate way of someone managing something significant. Elena did not look away, and she did not look down, and she did not fill the silence with anything unnecessary. She simply waited. All right, he said finally. His voice was even. Almost. That's all for now. Elena stood. She picked up her apron from the back of the chair where she'd draped it. She was almost at the door when he spoke again. Elena. She turned. The recipe, he said. Is there more of it? More things from the notebook? She understood what he was really asking. She thought about it for a moment. Come to the kitchen on Sunday morning, she said. Early, before the staff arrives. He looked at her. I'll make you breakfast, she said. She left before he could respond, and the thing she did not say, and did not need to say, was that she had made the offer because she understood what it was like to need something back that you thought you had lost. She had learned it the same place she had learned most things that actually mattered. In a small kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, from an old woman with flour on her hands and stories in her voice, and a recipe that was always about more than food. She walked back down the corridor toward the east wing. She had linen closets to finish. She had work to do. Behind her in the study, Adrian Moretti sat alone with the brown box and the loose kitchen string, and the wax paper folded carefully back in place. And for the first time in a very long time, he had something he hadn't had before. A question he actually wanted to find the answer to. What kind of woman brings a gift she knows will be laughed at because she believes the person receiving it needs to remember something more important than anyone in that room was going to help him remember? He had the beginning of an answer. He needed Sunday morning to understand the rest. The week that followed was not a simple week. Vivienne called the morning after the party with the bright, self-assured energy of a woman who had slept well and was ready to move forward into the business of being engaged. She wanted to discuss the announcement in the Tribune. She wanted to discuss the venue options for the wedding. She wanted to discuss the guest list, which was, in her view, the most important conversation they could be having right now. Adrian listened. He said the appropriate things. He agreed to a meeting later in the week. When he hung up, he sat with the phone in his hand for a moment, and he thought about the word that his consigliere Felix had once used when describing a specific kind of problem that was not yet visible, but was definitely there. The word was underneath. The thing about underneath problems, Felix had said, is that they don't announce themselves until you've already made 3 decisions that are going to be hard to reverse. Adrian set his phone down. He thought about what decisions he had already made. He thought about what was underneath the decisions he had not yet made. And then he called Felix. Felix Amato was 70 years old and had the voice of a man who had been having serious conversations for so long that he found most other kinds of conversation mildly irritating. He answered on the second ring. "You're awake early," he said. "Or late. Which one?" "Early," Adrian said. "I need to talk." "You always need to talk when you don't want to," Felix said. "What happened at the party?" Adrian told him. "Not all of it. The important parts. The gift. Vivian's response. The ballroom. The laughter. And what had happened afterward alone in his study when he opened the box." Felix was quiet for a moment when Adrian finished. "Your mother's recipe," he said. "Yes." "How?" "The maid's grandmother worked for my mother before I was born. The recipe was passed directly." Another pause. "And the girl just brought it to the engagement party, knowing full well how it would go." "Yes." Felix made a sound that was not quite a laugh but lived in the same neighborhood. "Adrian," he said. "Don't." "I'm going to." "Felix, the universe has the patience of a priest and the timing of a comedian," Felix said. "You've been looking for that recipe for 6 years. The girl carrying it has been working in your house for almost 2 years, and it takes an engagement party to your wrong woman to surface it." He paused. "That is either the most efficient joke God has ever made or the most serious instruction." "I'm not asking you to theologize," Adrian said. "Then what are you asking me?" A long silence. "I don't know yet," Adrian said. "That's the most honest thing you've said to me in 3 years, Felix told him. After he hung up with Felix, Adrian spent the better part of an hour doing something he almost never did. He sat without any specific goal. He did not review accounts. He did not return calls. He did not plan. He sat and thought about the difference between the life he was building and the life his mother had tried to give him before it got built over. Lucia Moretti had died at 53 of a heart. She had, unknown to anyone, been failing for 2 years. She had not told Adrian because she had known he would have stopped everything he was doing to come home, and she had believed he understood this now, in a way he hadn't understood it then, that what he was building was important enough to protect from the interruption of her dying. She had been wrong about that. He had been building the wrong things. But she had not known that yet when she made the choice to keep her illness quiet. And he could not be angry at a decision made in love, even love that had misjudged the destination. He had found out too late. He had arrived, and she was already gone, and the kitchen in the house he grew up in smelled like nothing anymore, like absence, like the particular emptiness of a space where someone's life used to happen. He had never gone back. He had sold the house within the year, and he had spent the years since filling the space his mother's death had left with things that were large and loud and present enough to make the space feel occupied. Business, power, reputation, the accumulating weight of being someone that no one questioned, a fiancée who impressed the right people, a table full of expensive gifts, a ballroom full of people who were afraid of him or wanted something from him. Felix was right. Not about God or timing or any of the larger cosmic mechanics he enjoyed invoking, but about the basic truth underneath it. Something had been lost, and something small wrapped in brown paper tied with kitchen string had found him anyway. The question was what he was going to do about it. The question was whether he was still capable of doing the kind of thing that required him to be the person he had been before the power changed him. He didn't know the answer to that. He needed Sunday morning to find out. Wednesday arrived with the specific tension of a week that had more moving parts than anyone was admitting. The Tribune ran the engagement announcement. The photograph was good. Vivian had supervised the photographer at the party and had a talent for knowing exactly where to stand and how to angle herself in ways that communicated the precise image she wanted to communicate. She looked beautiful and appropriate, and exactly like what she intended to look like. Adrian looked in the photograph like a man who had recently been thinking about something else. His phone rang consistently for 2 days with congratulations from people he did not particularly want to hear from. He took the calls he needed to take. He delegated the others. He was moving through the week with the practiced efficiency of someone who has learned to operate independently of what they're actually feeling, and he was doing it well enough that nobody seemed to notice anything different about him. Nobody except Daniel. "You want me to pull her full file?" Daniel said Wednesday morning, setting a cup of coffee on Adrian's desk without being asked. It was not a question. "I already have it," Adrian said. Daniel paused. "You pulled it yourself." "Wednesday morning means you've been thinking about it since Monday," Daniel said carefully. "That's new." Adrian looked up at him. Daniel met his eyes without flinching. In 9 years, he had learned that Adrian Moretti respected directness exactly as much as he was made uncomfortable by it, and that the discomfort was usually worth it. "Tell me what you know," Adrian said. Daniel had prepared for this. "She's 29, born in Bridgeport, one sibling, a brother Marco, 3 years younger. Father left when she was 12. Mother passed 6 years ago, same year as her brother's diagnosis." "What's the diagnosis?" "Degenerative neurological condition, progressive. He was 20 when symptoms started. He's been in residential care for 14 months. Daniel paused. "The care facility costs more per month than she makes working here." Adrian was still. "Then how is she paying for it?" "Extra shifts here. She also works Friday nights at a restaurant in Logan Square. Has been for about 8 months. Daniel set a page on the desk. "I found something else. About 4 months ago, one of the other staff members, Rosa Delgado Laundry, had a problem with her daughter. Medical bill, school fees, I don't have the exact details. Someone paid it, left an envelope in Mrs. Caruso's office. Cash, no name." "Elena." "I can't confirm it," Daniel said. "But it's the kind of thing a person doesn't leave a name on when they're not doing it for recognition." Adrian looked at the page without picking it up. "And she repaired furniture," Daniel said. "In the staff quarters. The chairs in the common area were broken. She fixed them herself on a Sunday with tools she borrowed from the maintenance closet." "Nobody asked her to." "Nobody asked her to," Daniel confirmed. "She just did it." Adrian sat back in his chair. "She mentioned her brother," he said. "When she talked about Sunday morning, she mentioned getting home to him." "She visits him Saturday nights," Daniel said. "She takes the train, stays 2 hours and takes the train back." The room was quiet. "Pull whatever else you have," Adrian said. "About her grandmother, about my mother's household." "There may not be much," Daniel said. "Find whatever exists." After Daniel left, Adrian opened the file himself. He read it the way he read everything, carefully, completely, not looking for what he wanted to find, but for what was actually there. What was actually there was the picture of a woman who had been holding a significant weight for a long time and had not once in 22 months of working inside his house asked for anything. Not a raise, not a reference, not a conversation with anyone above Mrs. Caruso. She had come to work, done her job well, helped the people around her in the specific quiet way of someone who does not think of it as notable behavior, and gone home. She had carried a recipe that connected 2 families across decades and had waited apparently for the right moment. Or she had simply given it without a calculation because that was the kind of person she was. He wasn't sure which it was. He needed Sunday morning to decide. Thursday brought a problem he had not anticipated. One of Vivian's friends, a woman named Camille, who had the social instincts of a heat-seeking missile and the discretion of a gossip column called The Mansion, and somehow got through to Mrs. Caruso, asking whether it was true that Adrian had been seen speaking privately with the help the morning after the party. Mrs. Caruso, who had worked in the Moretti household for 11 years and had the diplomatic skills of a career diplomat and the backbone of a woman who had raised 4 children alone, told Camille that she was not aware of anything of the kind and that she was in the middle of a very busy morning. She relayed the call to Daniel. Daniel relayed it to Adrian. Adrian looked at the note in Daniel's handwriting and then looked out the window for a moment. "It's not a problem yet," Daniel said. "But it will be," Adrian said. "If Vivian asks, she'll ask," Adrian said. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing," Adrian said. "I'll handle Vivian." He met Vivian for dinner Thursday evening at a restaurant in the Gold Coast that she had selected because she liked the lighting and the chef had trained in Lyon, and it was the kind of place where being seen was the point of being there. She was in good form. She talked about the Tribune announcement and the response she had gotten from people she respected and the venue she had her eye on for the wedding. A place in Lake Forest with the right kind of grounds for an outdoor ceremony if the timing worked. She was articulate and charming and had a genuine sharpness to her intelligence that Adrian had always recognized, even when other things about her gave him pause. He waited until the main course to bring up the Monday morning meeting. "I heard you had a conversation," she said. Her tone was light, perfectly light. The kind of light that is a performance of lightness. "I spoke with Elena Rossi," he said. "The woman who brought the gift on Saturday." Vivian set her fork down. Not dramatically, just set it down. "About the gift," she said. "The recipe she used, Adrian said, came from my mother." Vivian looked at him. "What do you mean it came from your mother?" He explained it, briefly. The connection between the grandmothers, the notebook, the note in the margin. He watched Vivian's face as he told her. He was watching for many things. What he saw was not what he expected. He expected dismissal. Some version of that's very touching, but let's be clear about what this woman is to us. Some version of the charming rationalization that Vivian was excellent at producing. What he saw instead was something much more interesting. He saw the same expression Elena had described noticing, and that he himself had caught just for a second on Saturday night. The flicker of something underneath. But it moved across Vivian's face and was gone in an instant. "That's remarkable," she said. "Really, Adrian, what a coincidence." Her voice was perfectly calibrated, too perfectly. "It's not a coincidence," he said. "It's a connection." "Of course," she said. "A connection. That's exactly what I meant." She picked her fork back up. She redirected the conversation to the Lake Forest venue, and Adrian let her redirect it, and they finished the dinner with the smooth surface of two people who have not said the difficult things they are both thinking. But something had changed. He could feel it. Not in her behavior. Her behavior was impeccable. In himself. He had spent the dinner watching the woman across from him manage a conversation the way she managed every conversation, with intelligence, with strategy, with the specific skill of someone who has learned to be excellent at the game of impression. And he had thought about a woman who had sat across from him on Monday morning in an apron she had pulled off the back of a chair and had told him the truth without arrangement. Who had said, "I didn't know how," rather than explain it away. Who had said, "I was afraid of you," and then told him exactly when and why she had stopped being afraid of him without softening it into something more comfortable. Who had not once in that entire conversation performed anything. He drove home from dinner thinking about the difference between a person who was excellent at impression and a person who had simply stopped bothering to make one. He thought about his mother, who had never once been excellent at impression because she had never needed to be. Who had fed her neighbors and worked hard and passed a recipe along with a note in the margin that said, "This is for the boy." He was the boy. He was still the boy, somewhere underneath everything the boy had built on top of himself. The question was whether there was still enough room for the boy to breathe. Friday was quiet. Saturday was not. Late Saturday afternoon, Daniel knocked on the office door with a folder, and an expression that meant something in the folder was going to change the shape of the afternoon. "What is it?" Adrian said, not looking up from the contract he was reviewing. "I found the connection," Daniel said. Adrian looked up. Daniel set the folder on the desk. Inside was a photograph, old, black and white, the edges worn in the way that old photographs get worn when they are kept somewhere accessible rather than archived away. It showed two women in a kitchen, a wide kitchen with the kind of stove that indicated a well-appointed household. The women were laughing at something that had happened just before the photograph was taken, and the laughter was still in their faces. One of them Adrian recognized, his mother. Young 20, maybe 22 young in a way that he had only ever seen in photographs, because by the time he was old enough to register these things, the youth had settled into something more resilient and less visible. The other woman he did not recognize. But she had a face that had certain qualities that he had learned in the past week to look for. An openness. An uncalculated quality. "That's Julia Rossi," Daniel said. "Elena's grandmother. I found the photograph in a box of my mother's estate documents. She was a neighbor of your mother's in the old neighborhood. She was the one who took this." Adrian picked up the photograph. He looked at it for a long time. His mother and the grandmother of the woman who had been working in his house for 22 months, laughing together in a kitchen in a neighborhood that no longer existed, in a life that had been lived so far from the current one that it sometimes felt like it belonged to someone else. "They were friends," he said. "Looks like it," Daniel said. "Not just employer and employee." "No," Daniel said. "Not just that." Adrian set the photograph down carefully. He thought about what Elena had said. She admired her, the way old people talk about the people who were kind to them when being kind to them cost something. He looked at the two women in the photograph, young and laughing in a kitchen, and he felt the specific grief of understanding something too late and the specific clarity of understanding that too late is still not never. "Send a car for Elena Saturday night," he said, "when she comes back from visiting her brother." Daniel paused. "She usually takes the train." "I know," Adrian said. "That's why I'm sending a car." "She might not. She can refuse it," Adrian said. "But send it." Daniel nodded. He started for the door. "Daniel." He turned. "Find out the name of the facility where her brother is staying," Adrian said, "and pull their financial records, whatever they'll release." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Adrian?" "I'm not doing anything tonight," Adrian said. "I'm gathering information." Daniel held his gaze for a half-second longer than strictly professional. Then he nodded. "I'll have it by morning," he said. After he left, Adrian looked at the photograph for a long time. Two women in a kitchen. Two families connected by a recipe, and a recipe connected to a note, and a note that said, "This is for the boy." He turned the photograph over. On the back, in handwriting, he didn't recognize the neighbor who had taken it. He supposed were 3 words. "Best friends, always." He set it down. He thought about Sunday morning. He thought about a woman who worked extra shifts and fixed broken chairs, and left anonymous envelopes for people who needed them, and had brought a gift to a room full of people who would laugh at it because she believed the person receiving it needed to remember something more important than the laughter. He thought about what it meant to have something like that working quietly in your house for nearly 2 years. He thought about what it meant that he hadn't noticed. He thought about what he intended to do about it now. And he thought about Vivian. About the careful management of impression. About the laughter in the ballroom. About the flicker of something underneath twice now in 2 different moments. Something that surfaced not when Vivian was performing, but when something unexpected broke through the performance. He was a man who made his living knowing the difference between what people showed him and what they were. He had stopped applying that skill to the people closest to him. He had stopped because applying it was uncomfortable. He was applying it now. The results were not reassuring. He picked up the photograph again. He looked at his mother's face, young, open, laughing, knowing even then something that it had taken her son 38 years to begin to understand, that the people worth knowing are the ones who don't make you guess what they are, that the gifts worth giving are the ones that cost something other than money, that the boy she had raised before the power, before the building, before all of it, had been someone she loved not because of what he would become, but because of what he already was. And that what he already was had not disappeared. It had simply been very, very quiet for a very long time. Sunday morning, he was going to the kitchen early, before the staff arrived. He was going to sit in a room that smelled like butter and vanilla, and whatever it was that good kitchens smell like when something true is being made in them. And he was going to listen to a woman tell him things he had been missing for years. And he was, for the first time in longer than he could honestly calculate, not going to manage the moment. He was simply going to be in it, whatever that meant, whatever it cost, whatever it changed. He was ready for it to change things. He just didn't know yet how much. The car was waiting for Elena when she came out of the care facility at 9:45 Saturday night. She stopped on the sidewalk and looked at it. A black car, clean and quiet, parked exactly where the bus stop was. The driver was standing beside it, not leaning, just standing with his hands clasped in front of him and an expression of professional patience. "Ms. Rossi," he said. Elena looked at him. "I think you have the wrong person." "I don't," he said. "Mr. Moretti arranged this." She stood there for a moment in the October cold with her bag over her shoulder and her brother's voice still in her ears. Marco had been having a good night, which meant he'd been talkative, which meant Elena had stayed longer than she'd planned, and now it was almost 10 and she was tired. In the particular way she got tired on Saturday nights, the kind of tired that lives behind the eyes and has nothing to do with sleep. She thought about refusing. Then she thought about the train, which would take 40 minutes and require a transfer, and she got in the car. The driver didn't speak during the ride. Elena looked out the window at the city moving past and thought about Marco. He had asked her tonight with the directness that his condition sometimes gave him. It stripped away social filtering the doctors had explained, left things more immediate. He had asked her whether she was happy. She had told him yes. He had looked at her with the specific expression he'd had since they were children, the one that meant he knew she was leaving something out. "You look like you're carrying something," he'd said. "I'm always carrying something," she'd said. "That's just what I look like." "This is different," Marco had said. She hadn't answered that. She was still not answering it in the back of the car, watching Chicago go dark and bright and dark again outside the window. She was carrying something different. She knew that. She just didn't know yet what to do with it, which meant the only reasonable course was to keep moving and see what Sunday morning brought. The car stopped in front of the mansion. She thanked the driver and went inside. Sunday arrived the way Sundays in October arrive in Chicago, cold and gray and very quiet, with the kind of light that makes everything look like it's being thought about rather than lived in. Elena was in the kitchen at 6:15. She had expected to be alone. Adrian was already there. He was sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee in front of him, and the photograph Daniel had found Elena recognized it immediately, though she had only ever seen it in her grandmother's album, smaller and softer with age, lying flat on the counter beside the cup. He looked up when she came in. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "You found it," Elena said, looking at the photograph. "Daniel found it," Adrian said. "Apparently my mother's neighbor kept it for 60 years. Elena set her bag down and came to the island and looked at the photograph, her grandmother young and laughing, in a kitchen that no longer existed, beside a woman she had talked about for the rest of her life, with the kind of affection usually reserved for family. "She looks happy," Elena said. "She does," Adrian said. Then quieter. "I didn't see her like that very often. By the time I was old enough to remember things clearly, she was already—" He paused. "Harder. The way people get harder when life requires it." Elena didn't respond to that directly. She moved to the stove and began pulling things from the refrigerator she had restocked the previous morning, organizing them with the quiet efficiency of someone who has cooked in many kitchens under many kinds of pressure. "What are you making?" he asked. "Everything in the notebook that was marked Sunday," she said. "There are 3 things. We'll start with the bread." "I know you don't need it," she said. "But you've been waiting for this for 6 years, and I'm not going to hand you a single dish and call it complete." She looked at him directly. "Sit there and drink your coffee. I'll tell you what I'm doing as I go." A beat of silence. "All right," he said. And that was how it started. She cooked and she talked, and what she talked about was not the recipe, or not only the recipe, but the way her grandmother had taught it to her. The specific way Nonna Rossi's hands had moved the things she said while she worked, the memories she attached to each step, the way some people attach photographs to album pages carefully with intention. Adrian listened. He asked questions, not the kind of questions designed to move a conversation somewhere, but the genuine kind, the kind that pull more out of the person talking because the listener actually wants to know. She said your mother had a particular way of handling the dough, Elena said, pressing her knuckles into the bread. She said Lucia always worked it longer than the recipe called for. She said she asked her about it once, and your mother told her if you stop before it's ready, because you're impatient, you'll always know you didn't give it everything, and you'll taste it in the end. Adrian was quiet for a moment. She said that about bread. She said that about bread, Elena confirmed. But I don't think she was talking about bread. He laughed. It was a short sound, a little surprised, and it changed his face entirely. For a second he looked like someone much younger, someone who hadn't spent 17 years building a version of himself designed to be unreadable. Elena noticed it. She didn't comment on it. She kept working. By the time the bread was in the oven, the kitchen smelled the way kitchens are supposed to smell on Sunday mornings, and Adrian had moved from the island stool to the counter beside her, not intruding, but present close enough to watch what her hands were doing. "The notebook," he said. "Can I see it?" She pulled it from her bag. She set it on the counter between them. He picked it up with the same care he had shown with the photograph the night before. Not reverently exactly, but with the understanding that some objects are more than their materials, that what they carry is not visible but is real. He opened it slowly. He saw his mother's recipe on the 3rd page. He saw the note in the margin. He read it. He set the notebook down carefully, and he stood very still for a moment, and Elena kept her eyes on the stove because she understood that some moments require privacy even when you are not alone. "She knew," he said. "She knew I would need it. She knew you would need to remember who you were before the world told you who to be," Elena said. "I think that's slightly different." He looked at her. "You think about things carefully," he said. "I've had a lot of quiet time," she said. "Most people fill quiet time with noise." "I did for a while," she said. "After my mother died, after Marco's diagnosis, I filled it with anything I could find. It was only later that I figured out quiet was actually what I needed." She stirred something on the stove. "You learn things in quiet that you can't learn any other way." "Like what?" "Like the difference between what you want and what you need." She glanced at him. "Like what a room actually sounds like when no one is performing anything." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I heard that." "I know," she said. The bread came out of the oven at 7:40. Elena set it on the counter and cut 2 slices and pushed one toward Adrian without asking whether he wanted it. He ate it without ceremony, standing at the counter, and for a moment, it was just 2 people in a kitchen on a Sunday morning, and the 38 years of everything Adrian Moretti had built were somewhere else. He didn't speak for a moment after he ate. Then he said quietly, "It tastes the same." "I know," Elena said. "How is that possible?" "Because it's the same recipe," she said, "made the same way, with the same intention." She looked at him. "Food remembers what the person who made it was thinking about. My grandmother said that. I used to think it was just something old people said. And now I think it's one of the truest things I've ever heard," she said. He looked at the slice of bread in his hand, and then he said something that surprised her. "I want to tell you something," he said, "about why I agreed to this engagement." Elena waited. "It wasn't love," he said. "I want to be clear about that. I wasn't pretending to myself that it was something it wasn't. I knew what it was. Vivian is intelligent and capable, and she understands the world I operate in. Those seemed like sufficient reasons." He set the bread down. "What I didn't account for was the difference between sufficient and right. Those can look very similar," Elena said. "They look identical," he said, "until something breaks the surface and you see what's underneath." He paused. "Saturday night. The gift. What she did. She wasn't trying to be cruel, Elena said. People like that, they're not usually trying. It's just their default. Adrian looked at her with a slightly startled expression. You're defending her. I'm explaining her, Elena said. It's different. She paused. She opened the box, and she felt something for 1 second, and it frightened her, and she covered it over with laughter because that's what she knows how to do. She shrugged. I'm not angry at her for that. It's almost sad. You watched that happen and walked away feeling sorry for her. I walked away feeling something complicated, Elena said honestly. But yes, somewhere in it. He studied her. And me. What about you? What do you feel about what I did? He said. I was in that room. I saw it happen. The question landed between them. Elena turned to face him fully. You didn't do anything, she said. I know. And you've been sitting with that all week. It wasn't a question. He nodded. You didn't know what the gift was, she said carefully. You couldn't have known. What you could have done. She paused. But you're already thinking about that. That's why you're standing in the kitchen at 6 in the morning. Is that absolution? He said. There was something slightly dry in his tone. It's observation, she said. I don't hand out absolution. That's above my pay grade. He laughed again, this time longer, more genuine. And Elena thought, there it is. That's who he is under all of it. The thought arrived with a clarity that she immediately distrusted, because she had learned to distrust things that arrived too clearly in situations with this many complications. She turned back to the stove. Tell me about Marco, Adrian said. The shift in subject landed like a change in weather, unexpected, immediate, requiring a moment to adjust to. Why? She said carefully. Because you work extra shifts to pay for his care, Adrian said. Because you visit him every Saturday night. Because when you mentioned him on Monday morning, your voice changed. She was quiet for a moment. He's 26, she said. He was studying architecture when the symptoms started. He had to leave school. She paused. He's not going to get better. The condition is degenerative. The care facility is managing it, not reversing it. I know, Adrian said. Daniel pulled the facility's public information. She turned to look at him. You had Daniel research my brother. It was not an accusation. It was a statement, flat and waiting. I did, Adrian said. He met her eyes without deflecting. I'm not going to apologize for it. That's how I operate. I needed to understand the situation. My brother is not a situation. No, he said immediately. He's not. That was a poor choice of words. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned back to the stove. His name is Marco, she said. He still talks about buildings. He'll tell you about sight lines and load-bearing structures and the way light moves through space at different times of day. He can't walk without assistance anymore, but he knows more about architecture than most people who are actually practicing it. She paused. He asked me last night if I was happy. What did you tell him? I told him yes. Was it true? She was quiet for a moment. The thing on the stove needed to be stirred, and she stirred it, and she thought about what it meant to answer that question honestly. I don't think about happy and unhappy very much, she said finally. I think about whether the things I'm doing matter, whether I'm being useful, whether the people I love are okay. She paused. Marco is okay relative to what okay means for him. That's most of what I need to know to get through the week. That's not an answer to my question. I know, she said. He let it go. For now. They ate the full Sunday meal together, the bread and the 2 other dishes from the notebook at the kitchen island, without ceremony or arrangement. Just 2 people and food that carried more than 30 years of memory in every bite. They talked through most of it. Adrian told her things she had not expected him to tell her about his mother's neighborhood, about what it had been like to grow up inside a life that was comfortable but not wealthy, about the specific smell of his mother's kitchen on Sundays, that he had been trying to recover for 6 years, without knowing exactly what he was looking for. Elena told him about her grandmother, about the Sunday afternoons, About the way Nonna Rossi had told stories while she cooked, and how Elena had understood only later that the stories were the lesson, not the recipes, but the lives attached to them. She told me once, Elena said, that the worst thing you can do to a memory is treat it like it's finished, like it belongs only to the past. She said memories are living things. They want to keep moving forward. Adrian looked at her. Like a recipe. Like a recipe, she said. He picked up the notebook from where it still lay on the counter. He turned to the page with the margin note again. He read it a second time quietly to himself. Then he looked up. Elena, he said. And the way he said her name was different from how he had said it before. Not formal. Not the way an employer addresses someone on his staff. Something more direct. I want to ask you something, he said. You can ask, she said. I'll decide whether to answer. Fair enough. He set the notebook down. The morning after the party, when I asked you why you brought the gift, you said you thought it might mean something to me. But that's not all of it. She looked at him steadily. What makes you think that? Because you're not someone who operates on might, he said. You didn't work extra shifts on the chance that Marco's fees would be covered. You worked them because they needed to be covered. You didn't fix the chairs in the staff quarters on the possibility that someone might use them. You fixed them because they were broken. He held her gaze. You brought the gift because you knew, not because you thought maybe, because you knew. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the window, the October morning was doing what it was doing, cold and gray, and inside the kitchen, it smelled like bread and butter and vanilla, and something that didn't have a culinary name. Yes, she said. Then tell me, he said. What did you know? She was quiet for a long moment. I knew, she said carefully, that you have been living in a house full of people for almost 2 years, and you are lonely in a way that has nothing to do with company. I knew that you were about to marry someone who makes you look like a man thinking about something else. I knew that you had been looking for something for years that you couldn't name, and that I was carrying it, and that it wasn't mine to keep. Adrian didn't move. And I knew, she said quieter now, that your mother wrote a note in the margin of a recipe that said this is for the boy. And that you were going to spend the rest of your life not knowing she did that unless someone put it in front of you. He was completely still. So I put it in front of you, she said. That's all. That's all, he repeated. That's all? She said again. And this time there was something slightly different in her voice, a finality that meant she was going to stop talking about this now, and that she meant it. He accepted it. He looked down at the notebook. Then he looked at the photograph. Then he looked at her. I need to make some decisions, he said. I know, she said. They're going to be complicated. Most necessary decisions are, she said. I want you to know, he said, and he stopped, as though measuring what he was about to say against what he actually intended to communicate. I want you to know that what happened Saturday night in the ballroom, that will not stand the way it is. Elena looked at him. You don't need to do anything about it on my behalf, she said. I know I don't need to, he said. That's not why I'm going to. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded. Once. She began clearing the dishes. Adrian picked up his coffee cup and his photograph and the notebook and stood. Elena, he said. She looked up. Thank you, he said. Not for the meal. He paused. For Sunday mornings. She understood what he meant. Don't waste it, she said. He looked at her for a moment, one of those looks that carries more than either person is willing to say out loud, and then he left the kitchen. Elena listened to his footsteps recede down the corridor. She turned back to the dishes. She stood at the sink with hot water running over her hands, and thought about the strange, unasked-for weight of being the person who carries something that belongs to someone else. She thought about Nonna Rossi. She thought about, this is for the boy. She thought about the way Adrian Moretti's face had looked when he read that note, the specific collapse of something carefully maintained, the way a face shows what a person actually is, for exactly one unguarded second before the control comes back. She had seen that face before. On Marco, the morning the diagnosis came back. On herself in a bathroom mirror the night her mother died. The face of someone who has just understood that something they thought was lost is still somehow findable. She finished the dishes. She dried her hands. She folded the dish towel and put it back exactly where it belonged. Then she picked up Nona's notebook and held it for a moment, this small brown cloth-covered object that had traveled from one kitchen to another across decades and families and losses, and found its way finally to the person the note had always been addressed to. She put it in her bag. She had more shifts today. She had work to do. The afternoon arrived with a phone call that nobody had expected. It came to Adrian's private line at 2 in the afternoon, which meant it was not a business call, and it was not Vivian, because Vivian always used the secondary number, the one that went through Daniel first. This number was direct. Only 8 people had it. He answered. "I heard something interesting," said the voice on the other end. It was Carla Benedetti, 63 years old, the matriarch of one of the oldest families connected to the Moretti network, a woman who had survived 4 decades in this world by knowing everything before anyone told her. "Carla," Adrian said, "I heard you had a very interesting Sunday morning in your kitchen," she said. "With your maid?" Adrian set down his pen. "Who told you that?" "Someone who works in a house where someone else works," Carla said. "You know how it is. These things move." "Nothing happened in my kitchen," Adrian said. "I'm sure nothing happened," Carla said pleasantly. "I'm sure it was just breakfast." A pause. "I also heard the gift situation from Saturday, and I heard how Vivian handled it." "Carla, I'm not calling to lecture you," she said. "I'm calling because I'm old, and I have the luxury of saying things directly." She paused. "I knew your mother, Adrian." He was quiet. "Not well," she said. "We were in the same circles briefly when you were very small, but I knew her, and I knew the kind of person she was." Another pause. "The kind of person who could produce the kind of woman apparently working in your kitchen." "She's not—" Adrian stopped. "Not what?" Carla said gently. He didn't answer. "I'm not telling you anything," Carla said. "I'm just noting that sometimes the most important things arrive wrapped in brown paper, and if a person is smart, they don't leave them sitting on the edge of the gift table." She hung up. Adrian set his phone down. He thought about the word underneath. He thought about Felix saying you've been building toward the wrong destination. He thought about Carla saying things that arrive wrapped in brown paper. He picked up his phone again. He called Vivian. She answered on the second ring, bright social, already in the middle of her afternoon. "Adrian, I was just thinking about you. Camille wanted to know if we'd be available for Vivian," he said. Something in his tone stopped her. "Yes," she said. "I need to meet with you this week," he said. "Not for dinner, not at a restaurant, here in the house. There are things we need to talk about." A very brief pause. "Of course," she said. Her voice had shifted, still controlled, still calibrated. But something underneath it had received the signal his tone had sent, and she knew it. "Wednesday," he said. "Wednesday." She agreed. He hung up. He sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Felix was right. He had made decisions that were going to be hard to reverse. But hard to reverse was not the same as impossible, and sometimes the cost of moving forward was accepting the full weight of the correction. He was ready to pay it. He was less certain about what came after what it looked like to make different choices to apply the same instincts he used for everything else, to the question of who he was supposed to actually be. But he understood that certainty was not the prerequisite. The first step was the hard one. The rest would reveal itself, he hoped. He picked up his phone and called Daniel. "Set up a meeting," he said, "with the board of the Family Foundation. End of this week." Daniel was quiet for half a second. "The foundation board hasn't met in 8 months." "I know," Adrian said. "That's why we're meeting." "Any particular agenda?" "I'll tell you Wednesday," Adrian said. "After the other meeting." The meeting with Vivian. Yes, Adrian said. Another half-second pause. I'll set it up, Daniel said. Good, Adrian thought. The foundation had been established by his mother, one of the last things she had done before her death. A small organization focused on food security and community support on the south and west sides of Chicago. It had operated at minimal capacity since her death, ticking over with a skeleton staff and occasional check writing, but none of the actual energy or vision she had originally given it. He had let it idle. He had told himself he didn't have time to give it proper attention. He understood now that the truth was slightly different. He had let it idle because giving it real attention would have required him to spend real time thinking about the person his mother had been and what she had believed and whether the life he was building bore any resemblance to the one she had imagined for him. It did not. He had known that for years. He had simply been very good at not looking directly at it. He was looking at it now. He picked up the photograph from his desk. 2 women in a kitchen. His mother and a woman named Julia Rossi, laughing at something that had happened a half-second before the shutter clicked, connected by friendship and kindness, and a recipe that had traveled 30 years across Chicago in the cloth-covered pages of a notebook carried by a woman who had never asked for anything, who had worked extra shifts and paid anonymous bills and repaired broken chairs and shown up to an engagement party with a homemade gift in brown paper because she believed the person who needed to receive it deserved to receive it, even if the room would laugh. He thought about what that kind of person was worth. He thought about what it said about his own perception that it had taken him 22 months to see it. He thought about the board meeting. He thought about the foundation. He thought about his mother's kitchen and Sunday mornings and the note in the margin and the boy she had written it for. He was that boy. He had spent a long time pretending otherwise. He was done pretending. He set the photograph down. He picked up a legal pad. He started writing. Not a plan exactly too early for that, too many moving parts still shifting into place. But the beginning of something. The shape of what he believed could exist on the other side of the decisions he was about to make. He wrote for a long time. Outside the window, Chicago moved through its Sunday afternoon families and traffic, and the low hum of a city that kept going, regardless. And inside the Moretti mansion, for the first time in a long time, the man who owned it was doing something that the house had not seen much of in recent years. He was being honest with himself, completely. Without the management of impression, without the performance of certainty. Just a man with a legal pad and a photograph and a notebook full of recipes his mother had shared with a woman named Julia, who had passed them to a granddaughter named Elena, who had carried them into his house 22 months ago, and placed them finally in front of him. The note said, "This is for the boy." He had the note. He had the recipe. He had Sunday morning, and the smell of bread, and the memory of his mother's kitchen, and the slowly clarifying shape of what he needed to do next. He wrote until dark. He ordered nothing for dinner. He was not hungry for anything that could be delivered. He was hungry for something that required more than an order. Something that required him to show up and do the work and be willing to be changed by what he found when he did. He was willing. The week ahead was going to be difficult. Wednesday was going to be a conversation he had been avoiding for longer than he was comfortable admitting. But he thought about what Elena had said. If you stop before it's ready because you're impatient, you'll always know you didn't give it everything, and you'll taste it in the end. He was not going to stop before it was ready. He was not done yet, not even close. Monday arrived like a verdict. Adrian was at his desk by 7, and by 7:15, Daniel had placed a single sheet of paper in front of him, the compiled financial record of Marco Rossi's care facility. Everything that was publicly available, laid out in clean columns that told a story nobody had asked to be told out loud. Adrian read it once, then he read it again. He set it down. "How long until the current payment arrangement runs out?" he said. Daniel had anticipated the question. "Based on what she's making here, and the restaurant shifts 6 weeks, maybe 8 if she's been setting aside more than the average. And the facility's policy after that. 30-day grace period. Daniel said, after which Marco would need to be transferred to county care. Adrian said nothing for a moment. County care was not the same. Both of them knew what county care meant for someone with Marco's condition. Not cruelty, not negligence, but the specific particular insufficiency of a system, asked to do more than its resources allowed. Less attention. Less specialized management. The kind of slow decline that happened not because anyone was unkind, but because there simply wasn't enough of anything to go around. She knows, Adrian said. It was not a question. She has to, Daniel said. Adrian stood up and walked to the window. He stood there for a moment with his hands in his pockets looking at the city. And Daniel, who had worked for this man for 9 years and had learned to read the quality of his silences, understood that what was happening right now was not calculation. It was something older and less strategic. Don't do anything yet, Adrian said. I need to think about how. The how matters to you. The how matters to her, Adrian said, which means it matters to me. Daniel left without another word. Adrian stood at the window and thought about the difference between helping someone and doing something for them that they hadn't asked for in a way that made them feel the weight of the debt rather than the warmth of the gesture. His mother had understood that difference. She had sent food home with Nonna Rossi on Fridays without fanfare tucked into a bag, no ceremony, no acknowledgement that required a response. She had made it easy to receive. She had removed the part where the other person had to feel small in order to be helped. He needed to do this right. He was still working out what right looked like when Tuesday happened. Tuesday happened fast, and it changed the shape of everything that came after. It started with Vivian. She had not waited for Wednesday. Adrian found out at 10 Tuesday morning when Mrs. Caruso knocked on his office door with an expression that meant something had occurred in the house that she was not responsible for, but was going to report, because that was her professional obligation and personal standard. Ms. Laurent came by this morning, Mrs. Caruso said. She kept her voice neutral with the practiced ease of a woman who had been keeping her voice neutral for 11 years. While you were on your call. Adrian looked at her. She came to the house. Yes, she asked to speak with Elena. The name landed in the room. And Elena was in the middle of the East Wing, Mrs. Caruso said. I suggested it wasn't a good time. Ms. Laurent disagreed. She paused. She was in the East Wing for approximately 12 minutes. I was present for most of it. Tell me, Adrian said. Mrs. Caruso told him. What Vivian had said standing in the East Wing corridor, with the particular precision of a woman who had decided that pleasantness was no longer the most efficient tool, was this. She had told Elena that she understood Elena had been spending time with Mr. Moretti, that she wanted to be clear about something, that whatever Elena imagined was happening or might happen was a misreading of the situation that she should correct quickly for her own sake. That Adrian Moretti was a man who occasionally found people interesting and then moved on, and that for someone in Elena's position, getting attached to an employer's attention was the kind of mistake that ended careers. She had said all of this in a tone that was not raised and not cruel in any obvious way. Just clear, deliberate. The way someone says something they have decided to say. And then she had left. Mrs. Caruso finished her account and stood quietly waiting. What did Elena say? Adrian asked. Nothing. Mrs. Caruso said. She listened. She said thank you for the information. She went back to work. Adrian pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. And then about 10 minutes later, I found her in the linen closet, Mrs. Caruso said. She was folding towels. She had her back to me. She paused. She said she was fine. But she'd been crying. Mrs. Caruso said simply with the directness of a woman who was not going to dress that in anything softer. Quietly, I think. Before I got there. She wasn't anymore. A pause. She's very good at that. The room was very quiet. Thank you, Margaret, Adrian said. It was the first time he had used Mrs. Caruso's given name in 11 years. She looked at him. Yes, she said quietly. After she left, Adrian sat very still for exactly 2 minutes. Then he called Felix. Felix answered on the first ring this time, which meant he had been expecting the call. "She went to the house," Adrian said. "I heard," Felix said. "You heard already." "I'm 70 years old, and I have been doing this for 40 years, Felix said. "I hear things before they finish happening." A pause. "What did she say to the girl?" Adrian told him. Felix was quiet for a moment. "She's scared," Felix said. "I know." "Not of you," Felix said. "Of the girl." "I know that too." "Scared people do things in straight lines," Felix said. "They stop being subtle. Vivienne Laurent has been subtle for so long it's practically a reflex. If she walked into your house on a Tuesday morning and dropped the subtlety," he paused. "She's already decided something." "She decided it Saturday night," Adrian said, "when she opened the box." "Then you're not ahead of this," Felix said. "You're even with it at best." "I know. Wednesday is too late. I'm calling her after this." "Good." A pause. "Adrian?" "Don't." "I'm going to," Felix said. "The girl." "Felix, I knew your mother," Felix said. "Not the way Carla knew her, not even the way that woman's grandmother knew her, but I knew her. And I'll tell you something about Lucia Moretti that you've maybe never had anyone say to you directly." He stopped as though choosing his words with more than usual care. "She was the best person connected to any of us. In this world, with the things we do and the way we do them, she was the best person. And she knew exactly what you were and what you were going to become, and she loved you without reservation anyway." A pause. "She would have loved Elena Rossi." The line was quiet. "That's all I'm going to say," Felix said. "Thank you," Adrian said. He hung up. He sat for 30 seconds. Then he called Vivienne. She answered with the bright tone, but there was an edge underneath it that hadn't been there before, a thinness like ice that's lost half an inch of depth. "Adrian?" "You went to my house this morning," he said. A pause. "I wanted to—" "You spoke to Elena Rossi." "I just thought we should—" "Vivienne." His voice was calm, the kind of calm that is not the absence of force, but the management of it. "We're meeting today, not Wednesday. Today, 2 o'clock. A longer pause. "All right," she said. He hung up. He sat for another 30 seconds. Then he stood, and he put on his jacket, and he went to find Elena. She was in the east wing where Mrs. Caruso had said. She was making up one of the guest rooms, moving with the quiet efficiency he had come to recognize as her default mode, the manner of someone who has learned to make their work invisible by making it very, very good. She heard him come in. She didn't stop what she was doing, but her hands slowed slightly, just slightly. "I heard about this morning," he said. "It was fine," she said. "Elena." She turned. Her eyes were completely dry. Her voice was level. Her face was the face of a woman who had cried somewhere private and put herself back together afterward and was not going to discuss the crying. He recognized that face. He had worn it himself. "She's not wrong," Elena said. "About what I should be careful of." "She is wrong," he said. "About several things. Adrian, she came to my house and spoke to a member of my staff in a way that was designed to frighten her," he said. "That's not something I'm going to leave alone." "It's not your job to defend me," Elena said. "I'm not defending you," he said. "I'm addressing something that happened in my house to someone I'm—" He stopped. She waited. "To someone I am responsible for," he said. "In ways that go beyond employment." She studied him. "Be careful," she said quietly, "about what you say next." "I know," he said. They stood in the guest room for a moment with all the unspoken things between them taking up most of the air. "I need to talk to Vivienne today," he said. "I had planned for Wednesday. It's happening today." She looked at him steadily. "What are you going to say to her?" "The truth," he said. "The version I should have been telling myself for the past several months." "And what's the truth?" He looked at her. That I agreed to an arrangement that was built on the wrong foundations, he said. And that I've known it for longer than I admitted. And that what happened Saturday night wasn't an incident, it was a clarity. Elena was very still. Don't do this because of me, she said. I'm not, he said. I'm doing it because of me, and my mother, and a note in the margin of a recipe that I should have had years ago. He paused. You are a reason. Not the only one. Not the primary one. He met her eyes. But I won't pretend you're not one. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned back to the bed she'd been making. Go have your meeting, she said. He left. She stood with her hands flat on the linen and breathed very carefully for a moment. Then she kept working. The meeting with Vivian happened at 2 o'clock in Adrian's study with the door closed and Daniel stationed outside without being asked. Vivian arrived perfectly composed. She sat across from him in the chair Elena had sat in 8 days ago. Same chair, same desk between them, but an entirely different quality of silence. She looked at him and said nothing for a moment. Then, "You're ending the engagement." It was not a question. "Yes," he said. She absorbed that. She was extraordinary at not showing what she was feeling. He had always known that about her. But he was also very good at reading what people hid, and what he saw in Vivian Laurent's face in that moment was not as he might have expected rage or calculated response or the smooth deflection of someone moving to a new position. What he saw was relief, quickly covered, gone in less than a second. But there. He looked at her. "Vivian," he said slowly. She looked at the desk. He thought about what Felix had said. "She's scared. Not of you, of the girl." He thought about the expression on her face when she'd opened the box at the party that 1 second of something underneath. He thought about what his mother's recipe had made him feel, and he understood something he had not understood before this moment. "You felt it too," he said, "when you opened the box." She looked up. "Saturday night," he said. "You felt something, and it frightened you." The composure held, but her hands folded on her lap shifted. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "Yes, you do," he said gently. "You felt something that you didn't expect to feel, and your first instinct was to cover it over and laugh because that's what you've always done with things that make you feel too much." Her jaw tightened. "That's not—" "I'm not accusing you," he said. "I'm saying I understand it. I've done the same thing for years." He paused. "What did it remind you of?" The silence lasted a long time. When she spoke, her voice had lost one layer of its calibration. "My grandmother," she said. "She used to make something similar. I haven't thought about it in—" She stopped. "A long time." He nodded. "That's why you laughed," he said. "Not because you're cruel, because it caught you off guard, and feeling that much in a room full of people felt dangerous." She looked at him for a moment. Something in her expression shifted not to warmth exactly, but to a kind of exhausted honesty that he suspected was not something she let surface as often. "You're more perceptive than I gave you credit for," she said. "We both underestimated each other," he said. "That's probably the most accurate thing I can say about what happened between us." She looked at the desk. "We weren't right for each other," she said. "No." "You knew that before Saturday." "Yes." "So did I," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Then why—" "Because it made sense," she said with the particular flatness of someone stating a truth they're tired of. "Because you were the right name and the right situation, and it made sense." She paused. "I've been doing things that make sense for so long that I'm not sure I know what the other kind feels like anymore." He thought about himself sitting alone in his study with a glass of whiskey. He didn't drink, feeling the specific loneliness of a man who has everything he wanted and none of what he needs. He thought about Sunday morning. "You could find out," he said. She looked at him. "What it feels like," he said. "The other kind." She studied him for a moment. Then she stood. She picked up her bag. "Take care of her," she said. It was the last thing he had expected her to say. "Vivian, I'm not doing you a favor," she said briskly, the composure reassembling itself because it was a reflex, and old reflexes survive even the moments that dent them. "I'm just—" She paused at the door. "She brought you something real. In a room full of real things that looked like nothing and nothing that looked real. That's not a coincidence." She paused. "I don't believe in coincidences." She left. Adrian sat alone in his study. He stayed there for a long time. Then he called Daniel. "Cancel everything Thursday," he said. "Everything. Clear the morning. I need the car, and I need the contact information for the director of Marco Rossi's care facility." A pause. "Adrian." "I know how to do this right," Adrian said. "I've been thinking about it since Monday." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I'll have it for you in an hour." "Good." He hung up. He picked up his legal pad, the one he had filled on Sunday night, the shape of what he believed could exist on the other side, and he read back through what he'd written. It was still true, every word of it. He turned to a new page. He started adding to it. The phone rang at 4:30. It was a number he didn't recognize, but he answered anyway, because there are days when you answer things you wouldn't normally answer. "Mr. Moretti," said the voice. Male, older, with the careful diction of someone who chose their words before releasing them. "My name is Dr. Reeves. I'm the attending physician at the Lakeview Neurological Care Center." A pause. "I believe you've been making inquiries about one of our patients." Adrian set his pen down. "Marco Rossi." "Yes." Another pause. "I understand you may have some interest in his situation. I want to be clear, I'm not calling about that. I'm calling because I think there's something you should know." A pause. "Marco Rossi is doing better than we projected 18 months ago. Significantly better. The new treatment protocol we started in July has shown—" Dr. Reeves paused, choosing his words. "I don't want to overstate, but the results are genuinely encouraging." Adrian was very still. "Has his sister been told this?" he said. "We told her last week," Dr. Reeves said. "Saturday, actually, when she came for her visit." Last Saturday. When Elena had come home in his car. When she'd been sitting in the back seat looking out the window. When Marco had asked her if she was happy. Adrian thought about Elena's face when she'd come into the kitchen Sunday morning. He had thought she looked like someone carrying something. He had been right. She had been carrying this. Not the grief of bad news. The overwhelming, complicated, almost too much weight of genuinely good news arriving in the middle of everything else when she had been braced for so long against the worst that the possibility of something different felt almost too dangerous to believe. "Why are you calling me?" Adrian said. A pause. "Because her financial timeline is a problem," Dr. Reeves said, "and I don't think she will ask for help." "I know she won't," Adrian said. "The treatment that's working requires continuity," Dr. Reeves said. "If the financial situation changes and his care setting changes—" "It won't change," Adrian said. A pause. "Mr. Moretti." "It won't change," Adrian said again. "I'll have someone call your administrative office tomorrow morning, whatever needs to happen to ensure continuity of care." He paused. "Without her knowing, it came from me." Another pause longer. "That may be difficult to arrange in a way that—" "I'll figure out the arrangement," Adrian said. "That's not your concern. Your concern is making sure the treatment continues." "All right," Dr. Reeves said quietly. "Thank you for calling," Adrian said. He hung up. He sat with the phone in his hand for a moment. She had known. Since Saturday night, she had known that Marco was doing better, actually genuinely measurably better, and she had come into his kitchen Sunday morning and cooked the full Sunday meal from Nonna Rossi's notebook, and talked about her grandmother and listened to his mother's stories and never once mentioned it. Not because she was hiding it, because it was hers. Because in a week when everything had become complicated and public and entangled with other people's decisions, that piece of news belonged only to her and Marco, and she was keeping it that way. He respected that with a completeness that surprised him. He also understood for the first time with full clarity what kind of person he was dealing with. Not a saint. He was too practical to be moved by sainthood, and Elena Rossi was too real for it anyway. Just a person who had been given too much to carry for too long, and had carried it without performance, without martyrdom, without demanding that other people acknowledge the weight. The kind of person his mother would have loved. The kind of person he had been failing to recognize for 22 months. He was done failing to recognize her. He went to find her again. This time she was in the staff common room alone. The dinner hour still 30 minutes away, sitting at the small table with a cup of tea and her phone in her hands. She was reading something. He caught a glimpse of what looked like an article about neurological treatment protocols before she heard him and looked up. He sat down across from her. She looked at him. "How did it go?" "It's done," he said. She nodded once. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yes." He paused. "Are you?" "I'm fine," she said. "Elena?" He said her name the way he had said it in the kitchen on Sunday, direct, no distance. "Dr. Reeves called me." Her face changed. Not dramatically. Just the careful arrangement of it shifted the way a landscape shifts when the light changes. Something opened. She looked down at her tea. "He shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. "He was worried about continuity of care," Adrian said. "I had a plan," she said. "I was managing it." 6 weeks, he said gently. She was quiet. 8, maybe, she said. "I had applications out for a third shift. I was going to... Elena." He waited until she looked at him. "Marco is getting better." Her eyes filled. She didn't let the tears fall. He could see the effort it took, the specific controlled breathing of someone who has learned to hold things in very specific places, but they were there. "I know," she whispered. "You've known since Saturday." "Yes. And you didn't say anything." "It's not..." She stopped. "It's not something I knew how to say. In the middle of all of this." She paused. It felt too big to carry out into other people's situations. He looked at her. "He has a chance," she said. "An actual chance. The doctor said if the treatment continues showing the same results." She stopped again. "He might be able to..." She pressed her lips together. "He might get some function back. He might be able to finish his degree remotely. He might be able to..." She stopped for the third time, and this time it was because she had reached the edge of what she could say without the thing she was holding breaking open. "Elena," Adrian said. She looked at him. "His treatment will continue," Adrian said. "I've spoken to the facility. It's handled." She stared at him. "No," she said immediately. "It's done," he said. "Adrian, I cannot..." "You're not accepting a gift," he said. "You're accepting a correction. I have a foundation that my mother built specifically to support exactly this kind of situation, and it has been sitting idle for 6 years because I couldn't bring myself to look at it. Using it now is not charity. It is what the foundation exists to do." He paused. "And it is what my mother would have done." She looked at him for a long moment. The tea had gone cold between her hands. "You can't use your mother to win arguments," she said. "I know," he said. "But I can use the foundation she built to do what she built it for." Another long moment. "You have to let me work for it," she said. "Properly. Not just household. Something that actually uses..." She stopped. "I know exactly what you're going to say," he said. "Then you know I'm right." "I know you're right," he said. "And I have a board meeting Friday. And I have a legal pad full of notes. And I have been sitting in my office for 3 days thinking about the difference between what the Moretti Foundation is supposed to be and what it has been." He looked at her. "I would like to talk to you about what it should become, if you're willing." She looked at him with an expression that had many things in it. Wariness, and something that was not wariness at all. Relief, and something that was more complicated than relief. The careful recalibration of a person who has been braced for a long time against outcomes and is now encountering one that requires a different posture. "I'm willing," she said. He nodded. "Thursday morning," he said. "I want to go see Marco." She blinked. "You want to?" He's an architecture student, Adrian said. Who knows more about buildings than most people currently practicing? And I am about to renovate a significant facility in the South Side for community use. He paused. I would like his opinion. She looked at him for a very long time. He'll talk for 4 hours, she said. I'm warning you. I have 4 hours, Adrian said. He'll draw things on napkins. I'll bring better paper. He cried last month because a building in Louisville got demolished that he'd been tracking for 2 years. I'll avoid the subject of Louisville. She looked at him. And then she did something that he realized in the moment it happened he had never seen her do in 22 months. Not the careful smile she used when she was being professionally pleasant. Not the controlled, almost smile he'd seen in the kitchen when she was saying something dry. She smiled. Fully. The kind of smile that doesn't make any effort to be anything other than what it is. It changed her face entirely. He had thought she was not someone who stood out in a room. He understood now that he had been looking at her from too far away. Thursday morning, she said. I'll have the car ready at 9, he said. She picked up her tea. She looked at it, registered that it was cold, and set it back down. Adrian, she said. Yes. What you're doing. She paused. It's more than the foundation, more than Marco, more than any one thing. She looked at him. It's going to change how people see you. I know, he said. Some of them won't like it. Some of them have never liked me, he said. They've just been afraid of me. There's a difference. She looked at him steadily. Are you ready for that? He thought about his legal pad. He thought about his mother's kitchen. He thought about the note in the margin. He thought about Sunday morning and the smell of bread and the specific, irreplaceable feeling of sitting in a room where nothing was being performed. I've been getting ready for it for 38 years, he said. I just didn't know that's what I was doing. She nodded. She stood up and picked up her cold tea and went to pour it out and start a fresh cup, because that is what you do with things that have gone cold. You don't drink them as they are just because you started them. You start over. You give it the heat it deserves. Adrian sat at the small table in the staff common room of the Moretti mansion and watched her stand at the small counter and make a new cup of tea. And he thought about his mother. He thought about what she would say if she could see this moment. He thought she would say, finally. He thought she would say it with the specific warmth of a woman who had waited a long time and was not at all surprised it had arrived, because she had always known the boy would find his way back eventually. It just took a recipe, and a woman who knew what to do with one. He picked up his legal pad from where he'd set it on the table when he came in. He wrote 2 more things. Then he looked at what the full list said, and for the first time in longer than he could honestly calculate, the shape of the thing in front of him looked less like a plan and more like a life. That was new. He was going to need to get used to it. He thought he was ready. He was almost certain he was ready. He stood up. He had phone calls to make, and arrangements to put in motion, and a foundation board meeting to prepare for, and Thursday morning to be ready for. He had a conversation with Felix to plan, because Felix was going to find out everything within 24 hours anyway, and he would prefer the man to hear it from him. He had a building on the South Side to renovate. He had a lot of things. The difference from a week ago was that the things he had were things he had chosen. Deliberately. With full knowledge of the cost. Without managing how they looked. He walked out of the staff common room. In the kitchen behind him, Elena made her tea. She stood with both hands around the cup and let the warmth come through the ceramic and into her palms, and she thought about Marco's face last Saturday when the doctor had said the words she had been afraid to believe. She thought about Thursday morning. She thought about what it would look like to walk into Marco's room with Adrian Moretti and watch her little brother, who talked about sightlines and light and the logic of beautiful structures, find out that someone wanted to hear everything he had to say. She thought about what it would look like to watch Marco realize he still mattered to the world outside his room. She set her cup down. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a moment. Then she straightened up. She had a dinner service to help with. She had work to do. But underneath the work and the service and the routine of the day, there was something that had not been there a week ago. Something quiet and warm and tentative and real. The beginning of something. She didn't name it. She wasn't ready to name it. But she recognized it. The same way she recognized the smell of butter and vanilla in a kitchen on a Sunday morning. The same way she recognized her grandmother's voice in the margin of a recipe. The same way you recognize without needing to be told that something true has arrived. And it is yours. And you are going to be careful with it. And you are going to give it everything it deserves. Thursday morning came in cold and clear, the way Chicago sometimes delivers its best days without announcement, without ceremony, just suddenly there, sharp and bright and completely itself. The car was ready at 9. Elena was already waiting beside it when Adrian came out. She was wearing her own clothes. Not the household uniform, but a dark coat and a scarf her grandmother had knitted, the one with the small imperfection in the third row, where Nonna Rossi had lost count of her stitches, and never bothered to fix it, because she said imperfections were proof that something was made by human hands and not a machine. Elena had explained this to Marco once, and he had said it was the best argument for imperfection he had ever heard, and that all buildings should have one deliberate flaw, so people would know they were loved. Adrian saw the scarf. He didn't comment on it, but he noticed. They drove across the city mostly in silence, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that belongs to two people who have already said enough important things that quiet feels natural. The city moved past the windows, and Elena watched it without restlessness, and Adrian sat beside her with his legal pad on the seat between them, and his hands relaxed in his lap, which Daniel, watching them pull away from the curb, noted as something he had not seen in 9 years. They were 20 minutes from the facility when Elena said, "He doesn't know you're coming." "I know," Adrian said. "He might be, it depends on the morning. Some mornings are better than others." "I understand." She looked at him. "You don't have to perform anything for him. He'll know if you are." "I'm not planning to perform anything." She considered that. "Good," she said. "He'll like you better for it." "And if he doesn't like me, then he'll tell you," she said. Marco has always had trouble with the social filter. The condition made it worse, or better depending on your perspective. "I'll take the honesty," Adrian said. "You might regret that," she said. He once told a visiting doctor that his tie looked like something a confused parrot chose in the dark. Adrian looked at her. She was doing the thing again. The full smile unguarded, the one that had taken him completely off guard in the staff common room 2 days ago. He thought, "I want to see that more." He did not say it. Not yet. Dr. Reeves met them in the lobby, a man in his late 50s with the particular tired kindness of someone who has been delivering both bad news and good news for 3 decades and has learned to carry both with the same steady hands. He shook Adrian's hand. He looked at Elena. "He had a good morning," he said. "He asked for graph paper at 7 a.m. We gave him a notebook instead." "He'll complain about the grid size," Elena said. "He did," Dr. Reeves said, "for about 10 minutes. Then he started drawing anyway." They walked down the corridor. Elena pushed open the door. Marco Rossi was 26 years old and looked at first glance younger. There was something open about his face, undefended, in the way that some people who have been stripped of their defenses by illness arrive at a place that looks paradoxically like freedom. He was sitting up in bed, with the notebook balanced on a tray table, and a pen in his right hand, which moved with only a slight tremor. Now much less than it had 6 months ago, Elena had told Adrian on the drive over, whispering it like a prayer she wasn't sure she was allowed to say out loud yet. He looked up when they came in. He saw Elena first, and his face did the thing it always did, lit up with the specific warmth of someone for whom his sister was still, after everything, the most reliable thing in his world. Then he saw Adrian. He looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at Elena. "You brought someone," he said. "I did," she said. "Who is he?" "His name is Adrian Moretti," she said. "He wants to talk to you about buildings." Marco looked back at Adrian. The assessment was open and unhurried, and entirely without the social lubrication most people applied to first meetings. He simply looked the way a person looks at something they are genuinely trying to understand without performance in either direction. "You have good posture," Marco said finally. "Thank you," Adrian said. "That's not a compliment exactly," Marco said. "It means you're used to people watching you. People watch you so much that you've stopped noticing you're being watched." He tilted his head. "What do you want to talk about buildings for?" Adrian sat down in the chair beside the bed. "I have a property on the south side," he said. 12,000 square feet. Originally a manufacturing facility. I want to convert it into a community space, kitchen facilities, meeting rooms, a space for skills training, potentially a wing for transitional housing. He paused. "I have architects, but architects tell me what's possible. I want to talk to someone who thinks about what spaces should feel like." Marco stared at him. "Transitional housing," he said. "Yes, 12,000 square feet. Approximately. What's the ceiling height?" "I'd have to get you the specs." "The ceiling height matters more than the square footage," Marco said immediately. "You can make 500 square feet feel like a home, or like a prison depending on ceiling height and window placement. If the people using that space have been through difficult things..." He stopped. "People who have been through difficult things need to feel like the space is on their side. Not institutional, not efficient. On their side." Adrian looked at him. "That's exactly what I want," he said. Marco looked at Elena. Elena was watching her brother with the expression she wore when Marco was doing the thing he was born to do, the look of someone watching a bird remember it has wings. "The notebook," Marco said. "Give me a minute." He turned to a fresh page and started drawing. Not carefully, quickly, with the loose, confident strokes of someone for whom thinking and drawing are not sequential but simultaneous, two parts of the same process. Adrian watched him. He thought about his mother. He thought about what she would have done faced with a young man who loved buildings the way Marco loved them, trapped in a body that had become a negotiation, drawing on a notebook with a trembling hand that still knew exactly what it was doing. He thought she would have done exactly this. Sat down, asked the question, listened. Marco talked for 2 hours. He talked about sight lines and natural light, and the specific psychological effect of high ceilings on people who have spent time in spaces that made them feel small. He talked about communal kitchens, about how the kitchen is always the real center of a space, how people orient themselves around food, not just for sustenance, but for the specific human need to participate in making something together. He talked about transition, about what it means architecturally to move someone from a state of need to a state of agency, and how the built environment could either support or undermine that movement. He drew 6 pages of sketches. He crossed out 3 of them. He started a 7th. Adrian asked questions, real ones, the kind that showed he had been listening and not just waiting for a pause. At some point, Elena slipped out quietly to get coffee from the machine down the hall, and when she came back, both men were leaning over the notebook together. Adrian pointing at something Marco had drawn. Marco explaining with both hands, his pen gesturing in the air above the page. She stood in the doorway for a moment. She did not go in. She stood there with 3 cups of bad coffee from a hospital vending machine and watched her brother talk about buildings to a man who was actually listening, and she felt something move through her that she did not have a word for. Not happiness exactly, though it contained happiness, and not relief exactly, though it contained that too. It was the feeling of something being restored, not repaired, restored. The difference being that repair covers the break, while restoration returns the thing to what it was always supposed to be. She went in. She gave them each a coffee. Marco took his without looking up from the notebook. Adrian looked up. He looked at her and said nothing. But the look said thank you. Not for the coffee. She sat down. The morning stretched, and neither of them wanted to cut it short. It was Marco who finally said at nearly noon that he was getting tired. He said it matter-of-factly, not apologetically. Not with the particular shame that some people feel when their body's limits interrupt something they want to keep doing. Just stated it the way he stated everything directly as a fact about the current situation. "Okay," Elena said. "I want to keep working on the 7th sketch," Marco said to Adrian. "Can you get me the ceiling specs?" "By Monday," Adrian said. "And the window orientation, which direction the building faces?" "Monday," Adrian said again. Marco nodded. He looked at Adrian with the same open assessment he'd used when they first met. "You're going to actually build this," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," Adrian said. "Most people talk about spaces like this and don't build them," Marco said. "They run out of will about halfway through because it stops being interesting and starts being work." "I'm not most people," Adrian said. Marco considered this. "No," he said. "I don't think you are." He looked at Elena. "He's okay." "High praise," Elena said. "It's the highest I give," Marco said simply. He settled back against his pillow. "Come back when you have the specs." Adrian stood. He picked up the coffee cup and held out his hand to Marco. Marco shook it, a firm grip, brief, the handshake of someone who has not lost his understanding of what a handshake means, even when other things have become difficult. "Marco," Adrian said, "your drawings are extraordinary." Marco looked at him. "I know," he said. And then, without irony, without false modesty, with the plain confidence of someone who knows the difference between arrogance and accurate self-knowledge, "I had to get very sick before I stopped apologizing for that. It's the one thing the disease gave me that I'm actually grateful for." Adrian held his gaze for a moment. "Keep drawing," he said. "I will," Marco said. They left. In the corridor, Elena walked beside Adrian, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Adrian said, "He's remarkable." "I know," she said. "He's going to finish that degree." She was quiet for a moment. "The doctors say the new treatment—" "He's going to finish it," Adrian said. Not with false certainty, with the specific conviction of someone who has decided that a thing is going to happen and is prepared to apply whatever is necessary to make it so. She looked at him. She did not argue. She understood in that moment that arguing was not the right response. The right response was what she said next. "Thank you," she said. Simple, direct, no performance around it. "Don't thank me," he said. "Come to the board meeting tomorrow." She stopped walking. "The foundation board meeting," he said. "Friday morning. I want you there." "Adrian, I'm not—" "You're exactly who should be there," he said. "You understand what the foundation should be doing better than anyone currently in that room. You've been doing the work the foundation was built to support for your entire adult life, informally, without resources, without support." He looked at her. "Come and tell them what it should look like when it's done right." She stood in the corridor of the care facility with coffee cups in her hand and her grandmother's imperfect scarf around her neck, and looked at this man who 3 weeks ago she had never spoken to directly. And she thought about what it meant to say yes to something that would change the shape of your life. She thought about what Nonna Rossi had said once when Elena had been afraid to take a step she knew she needed to take. She had said the fear and the right thing often feel identical at first. The only way to tell them apart is to go toward it and see what's waiting. "What time?" Elena said. 9 o'clock, Adrian said. "I'll be there," she said. The Friday board meeting of the Moretti Foundation was scheduled for 2 hours. It ran for 4. The board consisted of 7 people, 3 of whom had been appointed by Adrian's father and had treated the foundation as a legacy obligation rather than an active cause, 2 of whom genuinely cared but had been directionless without leadership, and 2 who were friends of Adrian's who had agreed to serve without fully understanding what they were agreeing to. Elena sat at the end of the table. She had been introduced by Adrian as someone whose perspective this board has been missing. Nothing more. Nothing about her position in the household. Nothing that framed her as anything other than a person who had something worth hearing. The first 40 minutes belonged to Adrian. He laid out what he had written on the legal pad, the full shape of what he believed the foundation could become. A community kitchen network. A transitional support program. A partnership with residential care facilities for people with chronic conditions whose families were managing the costs alone. A space on the south side that would serve as a hub. He spoke without notes. He spoke the way he spoke when he meant something plainly without performance, with the particular authority of a person who is not trying to impress anyone because the thing itself is sufficient. The board listened. At the 45-minute mark, one of the legacy members, a man named Gerald Fitch, 71, who had the particular confidence of someone who has held a position for so long that he has confused tenure with authority, cleared his throat. "This is ambitious," Gerald said. "Yes," Adrian said. "The Foundation has operated within a much narrower scope." "The Foundation has been idle," Adrian said. "Not aggressively, factually. My mother built it to do something specific, and it has not been doing that thing. That changes now." Gerald looked around the table for support. He did not find as much as he expected. "Perhaps," Gerald said, redirecting, "we should hear from everyone at the table before we commit to a direction this significant." He looked at Elena. The look was not hostile. It was the particular kind of polite uncertainty that people deploy when they don't know what category to put someone in, and the uncertainty makes them nervous. "Ms. Rossi," Gerald said, "Adrian tells us you have perspective to share." Elena looked at Gerald. She thought about the ballroom. She thought about Vivian holding the brown paper package between two fingers. She thought about what it felt like to be looked at the way Gerald was looking at her right now, with the polite uncertainty of someone who has already decided the category and is just waiting for confirmation. She thought about Marco drawing on 7 pages of notebook paper with a trembling hand that still knew exactly what it was doing. She thought about Nonna Rossi. She said, "My grandmother worked in domestic service for 40 years. My mother cleaned offices. I have worked in this household for almost 2 years." She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes in turn. "I have also been solely financially responsible for my brother's neurological care for 14 months, managed a secondary job alongside my primary employment, and contributed informally to the welfare of people in this household and my own community in ways that did not appear in any budget or report." She paused. "I tell you that not to impress you," she said. "I tell you because the people this foundation is supposed to serve are people like me. And the reason foundations like this one fail is that the people making the decisions have never been in the position of the people they're deciding for." She looked at Gerald. "I have been in that position. I am still in that position. And I can tell you exactly what is needed and what is not, because I know from the inside, not from a report." The room was quiet. Gerald Fitch looked at her for a moment. Then something shifted in his face. Not much, not dramatically, but enough. "All right," he said slowly. "Tell us." She told them. She talked for 40 minutes without stopping. She talked about what it looked like to navigate the gap between earning enough and having enough, the specific geography of that gap, its contours, the places where support could actually reach people, and the places where it missed by just enough to be useless. She talked about food access and medical care and the particular loneliness of being the person in a family who holds everything together and has no structure holding them. She talked about what a community kitchen could actually do versus what people imagined it did. She talked about transitional housing and what the word transitional felt like from the inside, the specific terror of timelines of knowing you had a certain number of weeks before the next arrangement ran out. She talked about Marco. Not everything, but enough. She talked about what it meant to watch someone you love lose capacity and gain wisdom at the same time, and how the world mostly saw only the loss and missed the wisdom entirely. By the time she finished, 2 board members had taken notes. One had stopped taking notes and was just listening. Gerald Fitch was looking at the table in the particular way of a man who is revising something he thought he understood. Adrian said nothing. He sat at the head of the table and let the silence do its work. Then the vote happened. It was not close. The Moretti Foundation was formally reactivated with a new mandate, a new budget allocation, and a new position, Director of Community Programs, that did not yet have a name attached to it. After the meeting, as the board members collected their things and said their goodbyes, Gerald Fitch stopped beside Elena. He looked at her for a moment. "I owe you an adjustment of perception," he said. It was not exactly an apology, but it was close. From a man like Gerald Fitch, it was very close. "Thank you for listening," she said. He nodded. He left. Adrian appeared at her side. "Director of Community Programs," he said. She looked at him. "No," she said. "Elena, ask me properly," she said. "Not in a hallway after a meeting. Not as an assumption." He looked at her. Then he nodded. "All right," he said. He would ask her properly. He would do it correctly. That was becoming a habit, doing things correctly rather than efficiently. It was slower. It required more. He found he didn't mind. 3 weeks after the board meeting, the Tribune ran a story. Not about the engagement that had been called off. That story had appeared 2 weeks earlier, brief and carefully managed, the kind of announcement that communicated everything necessary in the most economical possible terms. This story was different. The headline read, "Moretti Foundation announces major expansion community kitchen initiative to serve South and West Side residents." The photograph accompanying the story showed Adrian at a press event, and beside him, not behind him, not to one side as an afterthought, but beside him was Elena Rossi, the newly announced Director of Community Programs for the Moretti Foundation. She was wearing the coat she'd worn to the care facility. She was not wearing the scarf. The photographer had asked her to remove it for a cleaner shot. She had declined politely, completely, and the scarf was visible in the photograph, the small imperfection in the third row, clear enough to see if you knew to look for it. The story mentioned the Community Kitchen Initiative. It mentioned the transitional housing plans. It mentioned the South Side facility, which was already in the early stages of renovation, designed in consultation with a young architectural consultant named Marco Rossi, whose preliminary sketches had, according to the lead architect on the project, completely reframed the team's understanding of what the space should feel like from the inside. It did not mention the engagement party. It did not mention the gift. It did not need to. Some stories carry themselves forward without the whole of the origin being visible. The origin was there underneath everything. A brown paper package on a gift table. A moment of laughter in a ballroom. A man alone in his study at 3 a.m, holding a piece of dessert that had crossed 30 years to find him. But the story that mattered was the one moving forward. Felix called Adrian the morning the Tribune story ran. "I'm reading the paper," Felix said. "I know," Adrian said. "The photograph is good." Daniel said the same thing. "She looks like herself in it," Felix said. "That's rarer than it sounds for a press photograph. Most people turn into a version of themselves when a camera points at them." "I know," Adrian said. "She didn't." "No," Adrian said. "She doesn't do that." A pause. "Adrian," Felix said. "I know what you're going to say. I'm going to say it anyway," Felix said. "Your mother would be proud, not because of the foundation, not because of the kitchen initiative or the building on the South Side." A pause. "Because you finally looked at the right thing and saw it for what it was." Adrian was quiet. Outside the window of his office, the city was doing what the city always did, moving, making noise, going about the complex business of itself, without particular concern for what was happening in any individual building. "She sent me a note this morning," Adrian said. "Elena, about the Marco's latest sketches for the facility." A pause. "She said he worked until 2 a.m. She said he was happy." Felix was quiet for a moment. "And you," Felix said. "What are you?" Adrian thought about it, not the quick answer. The real one. "Getting there," he said. "Good enough," Felix said. "That's the honest answer." After he hung up, Adrian sat for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and sent Elena a message. Simple. Direct. The way he had learned in the past month to say things without managing them. He said I would like to take you to dinner. Not a business dinner, not for any reason connected to the foundation. Just dinner. He set the phone down. He went back to the contracts on his desk. He worked for 20 minutes before his phone buzzed. He picked it up. Her message said, Sunday. He read it. He put the phone down. He thought about Sunday mornings. He thought about how this particular Sunday had started 3 weeks ago. The brown cloth notebook, the smell of bread in the kitchen, the photograph of 2 young women laughing, the note in the margin that had been waiting 30 years for its reader to be ready. He thought about readiness. He thought that readiness was not, as he had always assumed, a state you arrived at before the important things. It was something that happened in the middle of them. You became ready by going forward before you felt ready and discovering in the going that you were more capable than you had believed. He had spent 38 years building toward the wrong things and calling it strength. It had taken a woman with kitchen string and brown paper to show him the difference between strength and armor. He was not the same man who had sat in that ballroom 3 weeks ago. He was not entirely sure yet who he was becoming. But for the first time in longer than he could trace, the uncertainty did not feel like a threat. It felt like an open door. The opening ceremony of the Moretti Community Kitchen happened on a Saturday in February on the south side of Chicago in a building that had been a manufacturing facility 6 months earlier and was now something else entirely. The ceiling was high. The windows faced east and south, which Marco had specified because he said morning light in a space where people were beginning something new was not decorative but essential. It was the building telling people that the day was starting, that the direction was forward. The kitchen was the heart of it. Long communal tables, professional equipment accessible to individuals and families who needed to cook in volume. A teaching space where professional chefs volunteered 3 mornings a week to run classes on nutrition, on cooking for medical conditions, on the specific practical skill of making food stretch when money didn't. 2 rooms for skills training. 4 transitional housing units on the upper floor. A small library of cookbooks and nutrition resources, and in one corner, a handwritten card in a simple frame that read, "Food is memory. Pass it on. Gr." That last part had been Elena's idea. She had not asked Adrian. She had simply arranged it the way she arranged things, quietly with intention, without requiring permission to honor what mattered. He had seen it at the setup walkthrough the night before the opening, and stood in front of it for a long moment. Then he had turned to find her watching him from across the room. He had said, "Gr." She had said, "Julia Rossi." He had nodded. That was all. It was enough. The opening ceremony brought more people than anyone had planned for. The neighborhood knew about the kitchen. Word had spread the way word spreads in communities that have learned to be cautious about promises because promises had been broken before, which meant slowly at first, and then all at once, when evidence accumulated that the thing was real. The thing was real. Adrian spoke briefly. He was not a man who gave long public speeches, and he had learned that the people in front of him had not come to hear him talk, but to understand what the space meant for them. He said what needed to be said and stopped. Elena spoke after him. She did not speak from notes. She spoke the way her grandmother had cooked, from what she knew, from what she had carried, from the specific authority of someone who understood the subject from the inside out. She talked about her grandmother. She talked about a recipe. She talked about what it meant to carry something for a long time and finally put it down in the right place. She did not cry. She had done the crying earlier privately in the kitchen before the guests arrived with Mrs. Caruso, who had driven herself across the city because she had been in the Moretti household for 11 years and was not going to miss this for anything, and who had stood beside her and said nothing at all, which was exactly right. She finished speaking. The room was quiet for a moment. Then it wasn't. Marco was there. He had come in a wheelchair, still the chair, though Dr. Reeves had said last week that the goal for spring was a walker, an actual walker, and had said it with the careful precision of a doctor who had learned not to promise too much, but this time could not quite keep the hope entirely out of his voice. He had brought his notebook. He had drawn the building from memory from the inside, from the specific angle of the morning light coming through the east windows at 9 o'clock on a February Saturday. The drawing was extraordinary. He gave it to Elena before the ceremony started. He said, "For the wall, not the office, the kitchen." She had put it in a frame borrowed from the supply closet. It was on the kitchen wall now beside the card with Nona's words. The drawing and the words together said something that neither one could say. Alone, something about where things come from and where they go, and the long, improbable, necessary journey between. Adrian found Elena in the kitchen after the ceremony, when most of the guests had moved to the gathering space, and the noise had settled into the particular pleasant hum of a room full of people who are where they are supposed to be. She was standing in front of the wall. The drawing. The card. He stood beside her. They looked at it together for a moment. "She would have loved this," Elena said. "Both of them," Adrian said. "Your grandmother and my mother." "Yes." "They would have made each other laugh," he said. She turned to look at him. "You think so?" "I think your grandmother had a specific kind of humor," he said. "Dry, delivered without warning, the kind where you weren't sure it was a joke until you were already laughing." Elena looked at him. "That's exactly right," she said quietly. "How did you—" "Because you have it too," he said. "And things like that don't come from nowhere." She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back at the wall. "I've been carrying that recipe for 4 years," she said, "since Nona died, wondering what to do with it, whether it belonged to me or to someone else or to no one at all. And now it belongs here," she said, "on this wall, in this room, where people can come and make things and feel like the space is on their side." She paused. "That's what Marco said buildings should do." "He was right," Adrian said. "He usually is," she said. "Don't tell him I said that." "I'll tell him immediately," Adrian said. She laughed. They stood together in the kitchen of the Moretti Community Kitchen, with Nonna Rossi's words on one side of them and Marco's drawing on the other, and outside the door, the sound of a community gathering in a space built for them, and beneath all of it, the long, quiet thread that had connected 2 families across 3 decades. Lucia and Julia laughing in a kitchen that no longer existed, passing forward something that had made it all the way here. Adrian reached out and took Elena's hand. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just took it. The way you reach for something you have been moving toward for a long time and have finally arrived close enough to touch. She looked down at their hands. She looked up at him. She did not pull away. "Sunday dinners?" he said. She raised an eyebrow. "What about them?" "I want to make it a practice," he said. "Every Sunday, in the kitchen, from the notebook." He paused. "I don't want to lose it again." She looked at him for a long moment. "You won't lose it," she said. "You know that now." "I do," he said, "but I want to practice it anyway. Because some things deserve to be practiced even when you're not in danger of forgetting them." He held her gaze. "Especially those things." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You'll have to learn to make the bread yourself." "I was hoping you'd teach me." "It takes longer than you think," she said. "And you can't rush it." "I know," he said. "You told me. If you stop before it's ready because you're impatient, you'll always know you didn't give it everything." She looked at him. "You remembered that." "I remember everything you say," he said simply. The kitchen was warm and smelled like bread and coffee and the particular sweetness of a Saturday in February when something new has just been opened to the world. Elena looked at the wall one more time. The drawing. The card. Nona's handwriting. Marco's lines. 2 things that had traveled a long way to end up beside each other. She thought about her grandmother in a kitchen 60 years ago being handed a recipe by a woman named Lucia, who said, "If you take nothing else from this kitchen, take this." She thought about what Lucia had known that day, that things of value do not end when the moment ends, that what is given in kindness travels forward, that the boy who would need it someday would find it eventually if the people who carried it were faithful to the carrying. They had been faithful. Nonna Rossi had carried it for 40 years. Elena had carried it for 4, and now it was here on a wall in a kitchen on the south side of Chicago, surrounded by people. It was built to feed beside a drawing made by a young man who loved buildings enough to draw them with a trembling hand at 2 in the morning. Because the work mattered and the work was worth it. She looked at Adrian. He was looking at her. She thought about a brown paper package on a gift table. She thought about a ballroom full of people who had been looking at the wrong things. She thought about the moment she set the package down on the edge of the table and stepped back and thought, whatever comes next, I gave something true. She had not known then how far truth could travel. She knew now. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. And in that kitchen, surrounded by everything that had been built from the ruins of what didn't fit, and the recovery of what had been lost, and the faithful carrying of what had always mattered. Adrian Moretti, the boy his mother had written a note for 30 years ago, had finally completely found his way home. Not to a place. To himself. To the person who had been waiting inside all the things he had built. Patient as bread dough, quiet as a recipe, written in the margin of a notebook, certain as the morning light coming through east-facing windows on a Saturday in February. The most powerful gift is never the most expensive one in the room. It is the one that knows exactly who you are and gives you back to yourself.